It's Tuesday. It's time for coffee and cursey words. I am cozy. I'm in a hoodie. Look, it's finally cold. I am ready for all of the sweater weather, though in my world it's more like hoodie weather. because because I love hoodies. Look, it's got pockets. I love it. How are you this wonderful Tuesday? We have lots to talk about. I feel like I say that every week. I don't know if I'm ever going to come in and say we don't have lots to talk about. Maybe let's fingers crossed and it'll be like, hey guys, we're just going to have some fun today and just chit chat and answer questions. But we have a full show. We are talking about the weekly quick bits, just a few. Then we're going to talk about the legality of Squid Game and the player consent form. I have been wanting to talk about it forever, and we've been so busy, and it's just time to have a little bit of a giggle about it because it's a TV show and I'm going to do my best with no spoilers. I haven't finished Squid Game, so I can't spoil it too far ahead. So chat, roll with me on trying to keep it spoiler light when we talk about Squid Game. And then we're going to go through this transcript from the September 29th hearing from Britney Spears. That was shared by Noted Your Honor over on Twitter. I retweeted it. Thank you for sharing it. With everybody so you all can see, but I'm going to go through my takeaways and the intrigue from a transcript and the little moments that I thought were very interesting. So let me know where you all are coming in from. Replay crew, love you. There will be timestamps after the end of the stream when I put them in, because yes, I put the timestamps in on Tuesdays. So we will be doing all the things. The hair is kind of curled, and then I leave tomorrow to go to a conference. So I will be on social, but I will not. I always say this, and then shit always pops off. I don't intend to be streaming again until next week after Halloween. All of you have a wonderful Halloween, but you never know. Also, new Emily show for you tomorrow, talking about kind of all the information that came out with regard to the discovery of Brian Laundrie, my thoughts on it, and all the things. So that will be live on the channel for you tomorrow. Make sure you've got your bell on. Join the text crew if you're in North America at textemily.com. And you can find that in the description box below. Those are all the things. Like, subscribe, do the YouTube things. Let's go. Let's go. It's time. I want to talk about this transcript so badly. And I want to talk about Squid Game. And I want to talk about Faze Clan. These are the things I want to talk about this morning, and I'm very excited. So let's just get it. Hey there. If we haven't met yet, I'm Emily D. Baker, the badass lawyer and everyone's favorite legal commentator. I'm the host of The Emily Show, and I break down the legal shit behind the news and pop culture stories we all want to talk about. I have been a licensed attorney for over 15 years, but this is not legal advice. I should warn you, I'm a big fan of the cursey words. This channel is where the law nerds unite to talk about facts, not fuckery. I always love seeing you guys come in from all over the world. I think it's one of the things that make the law nerds so unique is that there are so many of us that just want to have a chat about the law and sometimes the tea that is going on and talk about that with facts. And then at least when we're going to talk about fuckery, because Squid Game is just all fuckery, but when we're going to talk about fuckery, we say, hey, this is opinion. This is sass. This isn't like my word. This isn't the facts. So we're going to talk about those things. Lucinda, happy to celebrate my birthday with a matcha latte on Tuesday Live, counting down the minutes until I turn 26 and start my golden year. Well, happy birthday, and yay 26. I'm all the years should be golden, shouldn't they? I want them all to be golden. I am much older than that. I love that though. My voice is still a little hoarse due to a karaoke bar. Do you guys follow me on Instagram? If you follow me on Instagram, you might have seen where I was this weekend. My dear friend, and she's also part of the team here. She and I met before I even left the DA's office in my first baby steps into entrepreneurship. And she was in town for her birthday. And we ended up at this wild bar that had karaoke and animatronics, like Chuck E. Cheese for adults with booze. And we had the most fun singing karaoke and hanging out. We were near Vanderbilt University. There were a bunch of Vandy grads that were kind of having a friend reunion with a very large group of friends, and they were a blast. And then there was another large group having a birthday party, and they were not as much of a blast, but kind of. And we just had so much fun in NYC drinking water after my watermelon Red Bull. I didn't even know Red Bull came in watermelon, but I'm gonna have to try it because back in the day, like way back in the day, when I was young, uh, when I was young, um, I loved a Red Bull vodka, and it's been a really long time. Watermelon Red Bull might be able to get me into the things. Yes, Cade, in fact, the mayor of the internet. It was amazing. So I am still drinking bulletproof coffee. I am in my intermittent fasting this morning. And then I've got multiple waters. So, yes, we did karaoke with backup animatronics. I will post it again on Instagram for any of you that didn't catch it this weekend. It was magically ridiculous, and that is the best. Isn't that the best kind of ridiculous? So, just thank you for a little chit chat. I appreciate it. Did anyone recognize you, Georgia? Here, young Fox. This very drunk guy came up to me and was like, "Hey, I know you." I'm like, "Yeah, buddy. Your friends are looking for you," and kind of pointed him the other way. I was definitely trying to be incognito, but if you guys see me out and about, it's please come up and say hi. I mean, I'm sure I will meet plenty of law nerds at the conference I'm going to be at because there will be those there who work in the social media space. Kristen said, "Tomorrow is my birthday. I'm excited. Even in my 40s, I also found a case law to support the loss of privilege stuff I DM'd about. Thank you. I'll send it as usual because I went researching like I was back in 1L. I mean, me. And the more rabbit holes, the better. So happy early birthday, Kristen. And you guys, if you are part of the text crew, I just a disclaimer. If you are part of the text crew, North America, we're trying to expand it. But if you're part of the text crew, I send out birthday wishes. If you did not get a birthday wish in the text crew, it's literally because it's either Sunday and my phone was off, or I flat out forgot until an unreasonably late hour and then was embarrassed to text at a late hour, because I do send those out every single day from the text crew. And once or twice I have forgotten and I always feel horrible about it. So if you're in the text crew and you put in your birthday, it doesn't show me whose birthdays it is. It just shows that there's birthdays so I can send out wishes. And then if you respond, I respond. So it was fun. Anna said, "My friends and I recently had a girls' weekend in Nashville. Oh my, no one told me how much fun that city is. It's a really fun city. And it's easier to get around than LA. So I've gone out and done more things in Nashville than I have in LA. It is a really fun city. I'm excited to get to the transcript. My cat's name is Vivian, and I can just imagine your school. I just imagine you're scolding her. Well, Viv's going to hear it from me today. I've read through this transcript so that I could not read the entire thing and summarize it. I have words for Viv, but we should get to quick bits first because it's quick bits. So let's all coffee together and we'll get to quick bits. Also, I keep talking about my socials. If you haven't and you want to, at the Emily D. Baker, we do the things. Also, if you are new here, go ahead and drop a 1 if this is your first live stream, because the live streams are an event and they are, they're better with friends. That's why we have a chat of, well, this morning, 2,000 people, which is amazing. Hi, y'all, law nerds. It's so good to see you. I'm also taking timestamps. So let's get into quick bits. I need an intro for quick bits. We're also kind of reworking the DEF CON one, so it's not so flashy, but we're working on a quick bits one too. Like quick bits. I don't know. It's a work in progress. If you guys follow the gaming world at all, FaZe Clan's going public. Now, what is FaZe Clan? FaZe Clan is a gaming content house? I don't know. I'm familiar with 100 Thieves. Why am I familiar with 100 Thieves and they're the ones I'm familiar with? Well, because I like Nadeshot. I find him to be a very entertaining content creator. We ended up meeting him once. I had watched his content because he was at one point was dating iJustine's sister. Look, I love the YouTubes. And so he was kind of part of a lot of those situations. And I started watching, Justine's videos and then Jenna's videos. And then I enjoy Nadeshot's content too. And then as he started 100 Thieves, just kept kind of watching along with their content. So as far as these large gaming content teams go, I am more familiar with 100 Thieves than Faze Clan, but Faze Clan is a content and gaming esports team that is going public. I don't know if you have seen the information about them going public, but I think this is a fantastic idea. Though there is plenty of shit that has gone on with Faze, stuff they've promoted that has been questionable, that people have questioned. I don't know all these members. All I saw, somebody was like, "Hey, I'm Faze Seabass," and I'm like, "What the actual fuck?" Like, all I remember is being in college. Was it Dumb and Dumber when it was like, "Kick his ass, Seabass"? Like, that's literally all I remember. So Faze Seabass, Faze everyone, they're all anyway. They are going public as an esports team. Why I think this is amazing. I don't think it's amazing because I know much or am a fan of Faze Clan. I think it's amazing because it's legitimizing and further legitimizing the world of esports where there is a lot of money to be made, but also the world of content creation as a business if they don't fuck it up. Could they fuck it up? Oh, yes. Oh, yes, they could. How could Faze Clan fuck this up? Well, once you're a publicly traded company, there are things that you can and cannot do. Now, we've seen Elon Musk get in trouble with this for tweeting certain things, and um what we need from influencers and content creators is a good understanding of disclosure laws. And with general content, like if I do an ad, I tell you it's an ad, I tell you it's sponsored, we mark the thing. Not everyone does that. They're obligated to do that. But the FTC is different than the US SEC. The Securities Exchange Commission governs trading of stocks and public companies. So once a company becomes public, value in the company is traded on the stock exchange. And it seems that they're going public on the NASDAQ, a very large and prominent US based stock exchange. I am not a financial expert. I will never tell you I'm a financial expert, but they are going different in a slight they are going public in a slightly different way. And I'm just going to pull up some of the reports on this so that we have like a visual to talk along with. But they are using a SPAC. Now, for me, and yes, I understand finances in so much as I studied business organizations in law school and loved them, but again, not a financial expert. Faze Clan is using a SPAC. SPAC does not mean the Saratoga Performing Arts Center, and that's what I thought of because you know what? I'm a Dave Matthews nerd, and SPAC is a really cool venue. SPAC in this context is a special acquisition company, essentially. And the special acquisition company gets around doing an IPO. An IPO is an initial public offering. An IPO has a lot more rules and regulations than using a SPAC. SPAC is using kind of a shell umbrella company to get public. If you want to know more about this, there are lots of articles about it. I'm sure all of the financial bros on, and I'm sure there's financial chicks as well on YouTube, will talk and break down this, how this offering works, what a SPAC is, and SPAC is really a way to get around all the stringent rules of an IPO that might not work for a group like Faze Clan. And Faze Clan is really, again, a content creation and esports team. Teams can be traded. Teams can be publicly traded. But what this does is it breaks down quite a lot of money when it goes public, selling shares of stock. And then the money that they sell and raise will go and be divvied in a few different ways. What I want to talk about with that is their valuation. The valuation of Faze Clan right now is at $1 billion when they combine the SPAC company and Faze Clan and take it public, trading at like FAZE on the NASDAQ down the road. SPACs have become really popular in past years. Again, find content creators that are financial experts that are not me. The thing that's really interesting about this is once they become a publicly traded company, anyone who's already an investor in Faze Clan is going to make a fuck ton of money, I'm sure. The members of Faze Clan are going to make a fuck ton of money, I'm sure. And it will hearken in kind of a new era in the business model that is content creation and the business model that is esports teams. Look, my kid's high school has an esports team. So, look, mom doesn't watch on Tuesdays. Sorry, mom. I love you. But when my mom doesn't understand us not necessarily reining in my oldest gaming because he is pretty good, I'm like, no, no, he's in training. Like this is actually colleges have esports teams. Kids can be esports athletes, and it's something that my kid loves to do. So the fact that he can game in high school is like my dream come true because when I said I made this channel to do the things that I always had to like hide about myself, which was really like break down the law and talk about pop culture and be a giant dork, gaming was one of those things that went on the back burner as I was studying, and I hated that. I love gaming. Like law school was me like trying to bide my time between like Grand Theft Auto and actually studying. So I really am interested to see the legitimacy of an industry growing because we have this new model in the world and entrepreneurs are wrapping their heads around this model too, a new model of content creators that is a very, very big industry. So let's get back into, oh, those are my notes. We don't need to go into my notes, but let's get back into how this money's breaking down because I like to follow the money because I am a nosy bitch. Look, look. I'm nosy. So, in talking about this, and this is a breakdown from the New York Times. Look, I you get the information where you can. This is a breakdown from the New York Times about esports joining the SPAC craze as Faze Clan goes public with a $1 billion valuation. Mr. Trink, who apparently is a former Hollywood entertainment manager who worked with Kid Rock, the company's 85 influencers who live together. 85? There are 85 Faze Clan members? The fuck? Who live together in a gamer compound. I'm sorry, gamers, but I'm a mom of a teen and I have a visceral reaction when it comes to 85 male influencers of a certain age living in a compound. Like I can actually smell it. It smells like feet. Uh no offense to Faze, but it's probably true. That's my speculation. Like visceral. Can you imagine the internet usage? Because they play a lot of online games. I can't. But 85 influencers live together in a gamer compound. We're going to have to hit the link and see what that is. And produce viral social media clips, compete in professional gaming leagues for money and accolades, and foster a devoted fan base. Faze has built on that following by starting an online store and branded merchandise and signing advertising deals with the likes of Burger King. These are very large sponsorships, like very, very large corporate sponsorships. SPACs are blank check companies that go public first with the goal of finding a private company to merge with. So the SPAC goes public and then you like bring in. And you guys are talking about the smell. Look, I can smell it. It's like pizza crust and feet. It smells like, look, I played men's water polo in high school. This smells like my teenage days. It just, I can picture it. Throw in a little chlorine, and that was my experience growing up. But yes, definitely pizza. Definitely pizza. So SPACs are the blank check companies. The blank company, the umbrella or the shell company goes public, and then they bring a private company in, and then the private company becomes public. This can be a way for smaller companies to go public by allowing them to bypass the traditional regulatory scrutiny that comes with an IPO, right? Rules. It comes with a bunch of rules. Once they go public, there will be rules. I hope there's a fleet of lawyers. Look, I know none of the Faze Clan kids, guys, dudes, adults, young men are watching this. Gamers, can we just call them gamers? But if any of you are, just have a team meeting with the lawyers to talk about the way you need to properly disclose things to not run afoul of the SEC, because the FTC doesn't play, but they're backed up. The SEC really, really doesn't play. And you can say things that affect a company's valuation publicly that can be hugely problematic. So there are rules. once you are a public company and an owner of a public company. I can't imagine who's going to be on this board of directors. I bet you Keemstar is going to end up on this board of directors at FaZe Clan. I can just see the next elevation happening here. Oh, I forgot to close my quiz. I had a quiz. I'll close it in a minute. But I can see it happening, right? So the board of directors is going to have to understand this world, and they're also going to need individuals who have some experience in this world too. So those who understand gaming and content creation, and those who understand the traditional world of the SEC, of public companies, of public offerings. And that'll be very interesting to me. But I know that Keemstar he always wears a FaZe hat in his videos, right? I know that he's an investor into FaZe. I know that he announced on Twitter that he was going to be retiring. I wonder if he will end up on their board of directors. But if he's already invested into FaZe, when this I say IPO because that's what's in my brain from the old days. When this SPAC goes down, when the merger is complete and this company goes public, probably stands to make quite a bit of money in this, which, you know what? Go ahead. Good. Invest in the people that you like, invest in the things that you like, and hope that they do well. There's no shade there from me. Let's talk about the money because I'm nosy and I promised I was going to talk about money. FaZe, look at this sentence from the New York Times. FaZe, which isn't profitable. Which isn't profitable. This is why an IPO would have been a bad idea, because they would have been like, why aren't you a profitable company? They're not a profitable company, which means they are clearing and breaking even every year. It doesn't say they're in the red. It says they are not a profitable company. Brought in $38 million in revenue last year. But where did it go? What are the FaZe Clan expenses? And expects to report more than $50 million this year. Whoever Mr. Trink is, and I keep seeing it as Tink, like Tinkerbell, because nerd and brain. But anyway, Mr. Trink said FaZe would use the SPAC to double down on content. This is the beginning of gaming's further ascent into the cultural zeitgeist. The $176 billion video game industry exploded during the pandemic, although some worry sales may slow as the pandemic eases. Esports is expected to become a billion-dollar business this year. Well, how can you have one team at $1 billion valuation? You are already the esports team Evil Geniuses received an investment from China's Fosun Sports Group that was valued at more than $250 million. So this is a company, FaZe, that's bringing in $50 million a year. Fleets of lawyers. And if there aren't fleets of lawyers, there's still time to get fleets of lawyers to tell you how to operate and not get yourself in trouble by what you tweet. Steve Cass, this is exactly what's on my mind. Elon learned the hard way by tweeting about things that he shouldn't have been tweeting about as the CEO of a publicly traded company, because there are rules. Let's get into the Reuters breakdown on this. Offerings from FaZe Clan, which launched in 2010, include online gaming, esports, sports merchandise. Do they have a G Fuel collab? I'm not making fun, but I am making fun. Digital content that targets millennial and Gen Z customers. The company has more than 350 million users across its platforms, which is the value of the company right there. In August, FaZe onboarded Bronny James Jr., son of basketball legend LeBron James. The video game enthusiast joined FaZe as a member. Is he FaZe Bronny? I need to go look. And is expected to stream games for the organization. Let's see where they're talking about the merger. The deal with B. Riley Principal 150 merger will provide $291 million to FaZe, including a private placement in public equity of $118 million and gross proceeds of $173 million for the special purpose acquisition company's IPO, assuming no redemptions. But this means that FaZe can clear over almost $300 million. So whoever invested into them is going to get money back. So look, they're going to have a board of directors. I imagine we'll see some familiar faces. There is a lot of money that is about to go around in this, and it's going to be very interesting. Look, not financial advice, but account for taxes, reinvest. Don't just buy it on Gucci don't spend it on Gucci everything and cars. And one day you might want to retire. So set up things so that you can retire. Work with a lawyer and a financial advisor, and don't fuck it up for everybody else, Faze. Like, just don't fuck it up. This can be a really good thing. It's like when 100 Thieves collabed with Gucci. I was like, look, this is becoming mainstream and it's a good thing for creators everywhere. But it's also a lot of responsibility to understand what the SEC regulations are and not screw that up. So Faze, congratulations on $1 billion valuation. Don't fuck it up, please. Just, just, just pay lawyers that say no 90% of the time, and bring on a board of directors that understands actually what you do, and some that don't, some OGs, and um, and Godspeed, and Godspeed, and Godspeed. That's a lot of money. It's just a lot of money. So that's that. That's Faze. That's Faze. That's $1 billion valuation for an esports company. I mean, we live in weird times, but why not? Why not? Next up, since we're talking about digital shit, let's talk about Facebook real quick. Let's talk about Facebook. Let's talk about Facebook. Joseph Bradley said in a super chat, very cheeky of Faze Clan doing all this so close to the Save the Kids crypto scandal that Faze Clan have recently been involved in. I think the timing is probably not something they had control over, because this was probably already in negotiations and in the works. But it is interesting. And the members who were booted because of that scandal have got to be just. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money that they're missing out on, assuming that they were bought out or that they weren't bought in when they were removed from Faze Clan. But if you guys are interested in what went down with that, CoffeeZilla did a great job breaking it all down. So it was great. All right, we have talked for way too long. Let us go on to Facebook. I don't know what it's going to be called. It's apparently changing its name, but Facebook. The Facebook for now, the metaverse, or how about the company that was the artist formerly known as Facebook? The Facebook papers, and I'm not going to get into the heart of the Facebook papers. The Facebook papers have started cracking open around the internet, which I find very interesting. Here are the legal issues I see. First, in some of these papers, they seem to contradict testimony that has been given to Congress, which can be hugely problematic in the legal sphere. Two, it seems that the whistleblower for Facebook really has brought thousands and thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pages of papers to various news outlets so that they are able to really dive in an investigative reporting way. Don't we love a good investigative report? But in an investigative reporting way, what Facebook is doing within their company. To be fair, Facebook did release a statement. I'm going to share that with you because, we're sharing both sides. I don't personally enjoy using Facebook anymore, but I'm on there for work where I need to be. I live stream on Facebook. Hello, Facebook. And some of you really enjoy that. Oh, y'all didn't tell me that I totally forgot to put on my earrings. And they're not even in here. The ears are naked today. Oh, well. They're normally in my drawer and they're totally not. I maybe need a second pair. I just got completely distracted. Anyway, I stream on Facebook because a lot of you all enjoy watching it on Facebook, but it's not a platform where I spend a lot of time or energy, but my dad does. Which, interestingly enough, kind of ties into what some of these papers were sharing, that Facebook is really struggling with its demographic, and Facebook is really struggling to find its place among the TikToks and the Snapchats of the world. So with this, the things that I thought were interesting is one, that which whistleblower Francis Hagen has been just everywhere talking about this. And I appreciate the difficulty it would take to stand up against a company so big and not know how it's going to be received. It's something that brings us back to the Elizabeth Holmes Theranos trial, and Theranos was just down the street really from the Facebook headquarters. But this is where we're seeing whistleblowers really stand up and be protected is a good thing. And the laws of the US that allow whistleblower protection are needed, and this is why. So they can't be retaliated against. Now, of course, the whistleblower for Facebook is somebody who'd already left the company, so the retaliation would really be in the realm of the documents or violating any contracts, but there's still some protection there. Facebook released a statement to various news outlets saying that, quote, I'm just going to read it so I don't mess it up. A curated selection out of millions of documents at Facebook can in no way be used to draw fair conclusions about us. At the heart of these stories is a premise which is false. Yes, we're a business and we make a profit, but the idea that we do so at the expense of the people's safety or well being misunderstands where our own commercial interests lie. Very interesting way to word that. The truth is we've invested 13 billion and have over 40,000 people to do one job. Keep people safe on Facebook. Now, they don't define what they say is safe. You've definitely seen some come out on social media saying, "Oh, so they've got 13 billion and 40,000 people invested in censorship on Facebook." But yet they're not removing all kinds of hate speech, because if they're removing all kinds of hate speech, we might not have had some of the things that we saw go down on the platform. There's conversations about the fact that Facebook hasn't put enough money or energy into language diversity so that the, trafficking of humans could potentially be happening in areas where Facebook doesn't have enough regulatory presence in the native language that's using on the platform, so they can't actually curate or regulate the content. And then there's still this ongoing conversation about content regulation on private platforms when private platforms have become more common to a common carrier. And we will absolutely talk about that in another time. So there is a really good breakdown on CNBC. They kind of had the highlights, if you will, of the Facebook papers. But the Facebook papers are stories from 17 different US news outlets from internal documents and going over internal documents. So if you want to keep looking, go ahead and keep diving into these, because they are at various news outlets and you can kind of find them under the Facebook papers if you want to go and give it a Google. Interestingly enough, Facebook shares ended up trading up on Monday after it was leaked that this was coming, which is interesting to me that people are like, "Oh, well, it's still fine." The documents were provided to news outlets by the whistleblower. She's since provided these documents to Congress and to the SEC. Remember, Facebook is still in the middle of a fuck ton of lawsuits, including regulatory lawsuits. Those aren't over yet. So those aren't done, those lawsuits and investigations. And then this is the statement from Facebook that I just shared. Some of the papers go into January 6th. The documents revealed frustration among Facebook's ranks about the company's ability to get the spread of content that potentially incited violence under control. Interestingly enough, Facebook wasn't the company that got flamed for that. It was Parler that got taken down off of Amazon Web Services. But what the reports that are coming out now are finding is that a lot of the conversation about January 6th was happening on Facebook. And I have my own feelings about what should and shouldn't be allowed on social media, because generally words, even when words are bad, words should be protected, because speech. And I don't love the curtailing of free speech, and I don't necessarily trust the way that YouTube, I love you. I thank you for letting me be here. Google, do no evil. But Facebook, I don't love the way that they are implementing their censorship, because I don't know how they're deciding what is safe. Like, what is safety? Is it safety from diverse thoughts and ideas that are accurate? Is it safety from human trafficking? Because I totally support shutting down illegal activity happening on your platform, but I don't necessarily agree that we need to shut down all speech just because maybe it offends us because speech is allowed to be offensive. Speech is allowed to be mean. It's free speech. You don't like all speech. That's okay. It's okay not to like all speech. It doesn't mean it's illegal. So, um, Facebook had to put additional security measures in place ahead of the 2020 election to stem the spread of violent or dangerous content if needed. But as many as 22 of those measures were set aside after the election. Before January 6th, internal documents reviewed by the AP showed language barriers. This is what we had just been talking about it. Well, the methods are meant by some to avoid an overzealous content moderation system. AP reports that certain measures have managed to avoid Facebook's hate speech censors. And if they have a ban on hate speech, that's fine. They are a private company. So they are allowed to say, we have a policy against hate speech. Fine. But then you have to implement your policy with transparency and accuracy and totally, not just all. And then you have to define what hate speech is. And I don't know if they've done that. So they go on to say in this article, we were incorrectly enforcing counterterrorism content in Arabic. An internal Facebook document said, according to the AP. Meanwhile, it said the system limits users from participating in political speech, impeding their right to freedom of expression. And that's a problem too, is what do you define as political speech versus what you define as troubling speech? And are those definitions different country by country? It becomes very difficult. And then I imagine the language barriers have made it more difficult. So I'm not surprised that this is coming up in these internal documents. They then go on to talk about Facebook in India and the fact that there was apparently further issues with regard to the Indian government and with regard to the language barrier. One researcher who set up an account as a user in India in 2019 found that by following Facebook's algorithm recommendations, they saw more images of dead people in the past 3 weeks than I've seen in my entire life in total in the news feed, according to the New York Times. So there's also this rabbit holing of negative or inciting content. And this is what the whistleblower talked about on 2020 as well, that the inciting content or the inflammatory content is what is getting engagement because people are fighting over it. And that is keeping people on the platform because they're like, Mah! And if that's what's keeping people on the platform because people are fighting over content that incites or invites heated emotions, and YouTube is leaning into that, then you could absolutely go down a rabbit hole of that type of content, which isn't an accurate representation necessarily and isn't helpful or healthy for everyone, but that the algorithm is leaning down that way. And that's problematic as well, because if the algorithm, as I say, I'm not going to soapbox and continue to soapbox, if YouTube's internal systems are pushing towards blind engagement, negativity is engaging more. And that can be negativity that's false, that's not false, what have you. But then it's going to lead down a path that should it be curtailed? Should it not be curtailed? Or if you're curtailing some, should you curtail all? I don't think these are easy questions to answer, but I understand particularly the language barrier issues that they are getting down the rabbit hole where somebody is like, hey, look, we are seeing lots of negative images of dead individuals. And that's where the algorithm is taking us. And maybe that's a problem. So then they talked about retaining users, that the platform is experiencing a dip in engagement among teens. I mean, my kids have zero interest in Facebook. Zero interest in Facebook. Like just zero. Just zero. They don't care. They don't want to be on it. They just don't care. Most young adults perceive Facebook as a place for people in their 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s. Because even the people I know in their 40s are kind of like, I'm tired of Facebook. Like I'm on other platforms that I like better and that I have a more positive experience with. At least At least TikTok makes me laugh. I mean, they're tracking everything about me, but at least it makes me giggle. So there's a payoff. Um, Young adults perceive the content as boring, misleading, and negative. They often have to get past irrelevant content to get to what matters. And that again is an internal problem with the algorithm. Competition. Facebook has spent a few years trying to fight the label of monopoly, which many lawmakers and academics say is appropriate for a platform of its scale. But among its ranks, and that's still going on, Facebook employees acknowledge the vast power of the platform with details that could fuel ongoing and future antitrust lawsuits, which is interesting. We'll tie in next week to this recently unredacted information about Google and talk about how these things go hand in hand. It really is interesting because I am still not resolved on the answer on this. There's not an easy answer for some of these questions that we're facing, but these are very modern problems that need newer answers than the way our monopoly laws were written. And I don't know if the government's the right result or if the users are the right result. I don't know. Generally, government regulation in this realm doesn't necessarily kind of get to the heart of the problem. So we'll see. I have a lot of thoughts. Um, and once they sign up, few actually leave the platform. Facebook's own research shows. Well, they don't leave the platform because you have to use your Facebook login to log into everything because Facebook created that. So you have to use your Facebook login and box other people out of that to make it inconvenient to leave the platform. Wait till we get into the Google ads of it all and the Facebook ads of it all. Monopoly's another day. So that is kind of a smattering of what's going on in the Facebook papers. But interestingly enough, Facebook didn't fight the release of the Facebook papers. There's not much to fight, but Facebook has hired a new attorney. So I don't think it's worth a swoop. We're still talking about Facebook. So let's talk about Facebook hiring Britney Spears' attorney, Matthew Rosengart. Let's bring it all back around to Rosengart. Facebook, what are you doing? Facebook's big mad over a new TV drama, and they want everybody to know about it. Facebook hires Britney Spears' lawyer to fight an upcoming TV show. Right? Facebook probably wishes it had a delete button for its timeline now that it's threatening an upcoming TV show with a lawsuit for potentially tarnishing the brand's reputation. So interesting. Doomsday Machine is an upcoming television adaptation of An Ugly Truth, a book that exposes Facebook's missteps on issues like misinformation, hate speech, and user security. I have not read An Ugly Truth, but I might queue it up on Audible. Not sponsored, but hit me up. I love Audible because I've got to drive tomorrow and I'm very interesting. Very interesting. I'm very interesting. Words. I'm very interested in seeing what this book is that is now being made into a television adaptation. I'm fascinated. No, I don't want to hit the ads. God damn it. Me being in words. Me being uncareful, not careful with clicking the things. They say that the drama will star Claire Foy as Facebook CEO Sheryl Sandberg. She was in The Crown and was lovely. The Crown is so good. And will tackle the chaos surrounding misinformation during the 2016 election. I am very interested to see. I am just very interested to see. I'm interested in the book. I'm interested in all of it. So it tackles the 2016 election and more recent controversies like the X-Check program, which lets celebrities and other high-profile figures bypass content moderation. If you're verified, you can say whatever the fuck you want. That's very interesting. It's like, no, we need them on our platform. Please, we need Kevin Hart on our platform. I'm only picking on Kevin Hart because it's a callback to Triller. That's the only reason I like Kevin Hart. I think he's funny. But look, letting celebrities or prominent figures just do whatever is an interesting scandal to have. As the series begins to come together, Facebook is threatening producers' anonymous content with a lawsuit, and it's using Britney Spears' lawyer to do so. According to Deadline, Matthew Rosengart, the same lawyer who helped free Britney Spears. Look, Verge. She's not free yet. Just, we're going to get there. But as of the writing of this article, her father has been suspended, but she's not done yet. So let's it's just one word. But now everybody's like, oh, Britney's free. It's not over. It's definitely not over. But y'all know that. You're the law nerds. You know what it is. Who helped free Britney Spears from her conservatorship? I know, inaccurate. Sent a letter to anonymous content CEO Don Olmsted, detailing the legal action Facebook might take if any of the false statements or exaggerations about the company appear in the show. So I wonder if Facebook went through the book and said, these things we are saying are false. Do not put them in your show, which would be very interesting because it's what the Queen's Gambit lawsuit is over, essentially, a misrepresentation from a book in a TV show. But in that case, they modified what the book said in the TV show. And if you want that episode's in the Emily Show playlist, if you want to see the Queen's Gambit lawsuit breakdown, the podcast episodes are a little more streamlined than the live streams because As stated in a letter obtained by Deadline, Rosengart says the First Amendment does not protect knowingly false statements or portrayals or those made with reckless disregard for the truth, even about public figures. Well, Rosengart, as always, look, the writing that comes out of Rosengart's firm has always been concise and lovely and appreciated. That is a very clear recitation of defamation, which we talk about so much. So with that, the Rosengart has put them on notice, and now he can go back if they do these things in the TV show and say, we told you that these statements were false. We notified you that these statements were false. So now we can argue to a jury, look, we told them they were false. So they have made a knowingly false public statement with a reckless disregard for the truth because we reached out and told them. That's going to be very interesting to see. Rosengart then goes on to attack the accuracy of An Ugly Truth, the book, noting that it's replete with false and defamatory statements, characterizations, and implications about Facebook and its leadership. If anonymous content decides to put any of these so-called falsities into its television adaptation, Rosengart says that Facebook will take all appropriate legal action. Look, Facebook has the money. You think Todd Chrisley's got the money to bring a defamation suit? Facebook is like, yeah, fuck you. We will bring all of it. We will bring all of it. It goes on to say, to our knowledge, Facebook, I cannot talk today. Facebook hasn't taken legal action against the authors or publisher of An Ugly Truth, which is interesting because why? If they're repeating what's in the book and the book hasn't been sued, like my argument would be, look, if it was false, then go after them and say it's false. How can I know that it's false? Your lawyer is telling me it's false. That means it's your opinion that it's false. I might not actually believe that it's false. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. And I imagine this is a hard conversation for a production company. Like, how much money do you have to mount up and ride against Facebook? Like, is anonymous content like, we ride at dawn, motherfuckers? Fuck you, Zuckerberg. We ride. Like, is that what's happening? I don't know. I guess we'll see when it comes out, whenever that may be. I keep meaning to get back to the article and I keep having things to tell y'all. Look, if the IATSE union that we talked about, and think I've internalized how to pronounce correctly, if the union has their walkout that is supposed to be coming, then I don't know when this production will come out because it's going to stall a substantial number of productions, and we will talk about that more the next time that I talk about the shooting on the set of Rust, because that union was already getting ready to strike, and I think what happened on the set of Rust is just going to solidify the position of the union against production companies saying, "Look, what we're not gonna do." What we're not gonna do. So, I'll be interested to see if anonymous content goes head to head in court with Facebook saying, "No, we're allowed to say what we're allowed to say. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not true. Just because you don't like it means that it is unknowingly false." And if they haven't taken action against the book, I think it's a pretty strong argument for the production company to say, you said it's knowingly false because you don't like the portrayal, but you don't like it doesn't equal defamation. So why didn't you take action against the book? If those statements, if the underlying statements were defamatory, why didn't you take action there? Rosengart even mentioned that Facebook is willing to work with anonymous content to ensure that the series is accurate and truthful. Oh, Rosengart, how generous of you. Look, Facebook would like to give you their side of the story to make this a beautiful Facebook propaganda piece. Oh, no, no, no. I really hope that the production company is like, "Oh, fuck off." I mean, not to Rosengart. I'm sure he's lovely, but to Facebook. Like at this point, tell Facebook to fuck off. Um, as for whether Anonymous will consider getting Facebook's input, that's still up in the air. I mean, at least if you have to work with an attorney, working with Rosengart probably wouldn't be difficult. It just might be that you disagree with their position. The Verge reached out to anonymous content for a statement and hasn't heard back. Facebook is probably just blowing smoke. Thanks, Verge. But can you get it right about Britney? I would really appreciate that. Thank you. But there's no way to tell until the series debuts and Facebook finds something it doesn't like. This may be one of the only times that Facebook is actively trying to squeeze into the plaintiff's chair, considering Facebook's long track record of being on the opposite side of lawsuits. Yeah, normally Facebook is the one getting sued. That's accurate. Facts. Facts. We've talked about so much. So that's what's going on with Facebook. We need to talk about Squid Game so we have time to get to Britney's transcript. Emily, how have you talked for an hour? Oh my God. Okay. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We're going to get into talking about Squid Game. So let me time stamp a boo and talk about Squid Game. Should we? Are you ready? I'm going to end the poll too. So let me do that first. Let me end the poll first and see how many of you have seen Squid Game. It looks like a lot of you haven't seen Squid Game. It also looks like our chat is moving with 3,000 of you very fast. I'm going to slow it down just a little bit more to help out the moderators, and hopefully I'll see the results of the poll as they go streaking by. 65% of you have not seen Squid Game. 34% of you have seen Squid Game, which fascinates me because it is Netflix's most popular, like by far ever show, like worldwide. So let's just talk about Squid Game. Yes, let's. Now I have to re-timestamp because I kept talking because I'm me. It's just facts. Let's talk about Squid Game. I'm going to try to do this as spoiler-free as possible. If you have not seen Squid Game, I'm going to try not to talk about the sum and substance of Squid Game, but there are a few things we have to talk about. So if you want to know nothing about Squid Game, now is the time to come back in like 15 minutes because we're going to talk about some facts that we cannot get around, and that includes the player contract. So for those of you who don't want to know a single thing, I'm done giving you a warning. I am not going to tell you about the ending. I'm just going to give you a rough outline. Squid Game is Netflix's so far most popular ever television series. And thanks to Drama Fox on Twitter, they captured the player consent form. And we are going to look at this player consent form through the eyes of me, not an attorney licensed in South Korea, an attorney licensed in California, but we're going to go through it with US laws. There are some obvious things here. I'm going to read the agreement. It's only 3 clauses because we needed to have some fun. And we had so much fun doing this with The Little Mermaid. It was time to just do it again. It's just time. It's just time because, The Little Mermaid contract was so much fun. Let's talk about the Squid Game contract. So, I've not seen the end of Squid Game, but let's get to it. Player consent form. Clause 1, a player is not allowed to stop playing. Clause 2, a player who refuses to play will be eliminated. Clause 3, games may be terminated if the majority agrees. Look, first of all, what the players don't know is what elimination means. There are lots of terms in here that need to be defined. This contract is a typical, it's not super typical. It's shorter than most US contracts. This contract is an adhesion contract. You have to agree or you can't play. And if you don't agree, you don't play, you leave, you cannot negotiate it. And that's what an adhesion contract is. It's like when you sign up for a YouTube account and you have to just click all the things, or when you update your devices and you have to just agree to the things. You can't call up Apple and be like, hey, this paragraph I don't agree to, but I want my iPhone and I want my iOS update, but I don't agree to these clauses. Those are adhesion contracts. Take it or leave it. No negotiating. That's it. So this adhesion contract is the player consent form, and they are consenting to play games, and they are told they are consenting to play games. They are not told what eliminated means. Eliminated in this game means killed. So they're not warned or forewarned that eliminated means dead. So in the US, you cannot contract for things that are illegal. If you want to see an example of that playing out in real life, you can go watch my coverage of the Alex Murdaugh case with a suicide for hire plot, which you can't enforce the contract. So there's kind of 2 things. 1, you can't enforce the contract. So Alex Murdaugh can't go sue the dude he hired or allegedly hired. Well, no, he said he did it. His lawyer admitted that he hired the dude. So I'm just going to go with that. Alex Murdaugh cannot go to the dude who was supposed to kill him and sue him and say, you didn't kill me. So now I want my money back because you didn't kill me. It's just like if you are, and this happened more than a few times at the DA's office, if you are purchasing illegal narcotics, not legal, illegal narcotics, illegal drugs, and the person doesn't give you drugs, takes your money and runs away, gives you something that's not what they represented it to be, you can't go to the police and be like, that person robbed me of my money. They were supposed to give me drugs. It's illegal. You can't sue them for that. You can't go to the police over that. So in the show, the contract is an illegal contract. They are contracting for an illegal act. However, we're going to set that aside and talk about the rest of the contract. So just know you can't contract for illegal shit. I'm sure that's probably also the case in Korea. I can't imagine that it's not the case anywhere. So, in the show, no, Elena, no, they didn't. No, it's a show. It's a TV show. It's not a reality show. I mean, I'm sure that no one was harmed in the making of the television show. It is a game where eliminated on the show, it's not a reality show. It's a drama. It's a thriller, truly. Eliminated means that they are terminated, that they are killed. So it's a Netflix show. It is not a reality show. People are not actually killed in the filming of this show, but the contract. They are told they are going to get a lot of money. We won't talk about the bargaining power of the show because that gets into the heart of the show. So we're not going to get into the differential bargaining power because they don't have bargaining power, I don't think, because this is an adhesion contract. You play for money or you don't. Charlotte said, it's kind of like Hunger Games, but a Korean drama. Yes, it's kind of like adult Hunger Games, but a K-drama, but they don't get recruited to it. Well, they do get recruited to it, but they have the choice. In the Hunger Games, you can't just opt out. In this, you can opt out. If you don't sign this agreement, or if you don't sign this agreement, they signed it. If you don't sign this agreement, you cannot play and you don't have the opportunity to win the prize. But this contract is vague. It's vague. A player's not allowed to stop playing. Okay. A player who refuses to play will be eliminated. They don't define eliminated, and they don't define refusing to play. Games may be terminated if the majority agrees. Well, what's the majority? What does agreement? What does terminated mean? And terminated contradicts clause 1, a player's not allowed to stop playing. So if the games are terminated, is a player then allowed to stop playing? It's so confusing. A player's not allowed to stop playing, but the games can be terminated. But if the games can be terminated, then clause 1 is kind of void, because then a player is allowed to stop playing if the games are terminated. It's just, it's very interesting. So this contract would never fly in the US. It would not be enforceable, and it is too vague for us to really understand what they're contracting to. They don't define eliminated. They don't define games. They don't define player, truly. I mean, you have to assume that the player is the person that's signing it, but they don't state that. And if the games can be terminated, if the majority agrees, what's the majority? How does that happen? And then is the player allowed to stop playing? Do the games being terminated void the contract? I don't know. I think it's very interesting. So if you have not seen Squid Game, I enjoyed it. I found it to be really fun. We have not finished it yet, but those are kind of my initial thoughts. If I'm looking at a contract, I want to know what these terms mean. And when you see contradicting terms, it's okay to be like, wait, these terms contradict. I need to know. I need to know. I need to know. I need to know about the contradicting terms. So, Squid Game on Netflix, their most popular ever. There's now an actual real world lawsuit over Squid Game, and I'm very interested to see how this plays out. The South Korean internet service provider is suing Netflix because of the traffic surge on their network, because so many people were streaming Squid Game. So Squid Game raised the traffic on SK broadband by 24 times. So a 24x increase of traffic, up to 1.2 trillion bits of data per second. So they want Netflix to pay the internet service provider for its increase in traffic, because Netflix made something that people want to watch so badly that they want to charge Netflix for the boost in streaming. I don't know where South Korea stands on net neutrality. I don't know how this will fly, but I'm very interested to see if Netflix will have to pay, because it's my understanding that the end user, like at my house, I pay for internet. I pay for Netflix. The internet service provider is supposed to provide me the things that I stream. So it's very interesting to see an internet service provider saying, no, we want Netflix to pay for how much people are streaming their content, because it caused a 24x jump in their service when Squid Games was released, which is wild to me. So we will see what happens with this lawsuit in Seoul. Look, I'm going to keep covering it because I'm really interested to see how this plays out. This wouldn't play the same way in the US because of the different rules with net neutrality, but I don't know how this will play out in Korea, and I'm very curious about it. So we will see. We will see what comes of Netflix being sued. I imagine this if I had to make a guess, and I don't guess on a lot of US lawsuits. This is not a US lawsuit, so stab in the dark. I imagine that Netflix will try to negotiate with SK Broadband. It seems that this is the largest internet provider in South Korea, or at least in the Seoul area. And so we will see. Netflix actually sued SK Broadband in April of 2020, seeking a declaration that it was not obligated to pay extra fees for boosting streaming. So it's going to be very, very interesting because in 2021, in June, here, let's pull this up. The district court ruled against Netflix, saying that receiving a service provided at a cost, it's reasonable that it should pay something for the service. So that Netflix is benefiting from the fact that people have internet in their homes and that they are benefiting from SK Broadband providing that internet in people's homes, and that they then may be required to pay for the usage. Netflix has appealed the ruling, but Reuters reports that SK Broadband has now filed its own lawsuit against Netflix for rising traffic and maintenance costs. Netflix data traffic on its network is 24 times higher now than it was in May 2018, the company said, driven largely by the phenomenal success of shows like Squid Game. SK Broadband estimated that Netflix owes roughly 27.2 billion won, about 23 million US dollars, in usage fees for 2020. So, the broadband company wants $23 million from Netflix for being successful. So we'll see. Reuters, here, we'll go on to the rest of this report in PC Gamer. The Reuters report says, and I didn't find the underlying Reuters report, but I should have grabbed it. The Reuters report said Netflix is the second highest data traffic generator in South Korea, surpassed only by YouTube. Yet Netflix and YouTube parent company Google are the only companies that do not pay network usage fees. Other providers, including Amazon, Apple, and Facebook, all do. I wonder if that's an unfair competition thing. Because if Amazon, Apple, and Facebook all have to pay usage fees for streaming and Netflix and YouTube don't, isn't that almost an unfair competition? Doesn't that give Amazon streaming and Apple TV an advantage or a disadvantage over Netflix and YouTube because their profits are going to be different because they have to pay streaming. And what's interesting is Netflix and YouTube are the highest streamed and they're the ones not paying. So it goes on to say we will review the claim that SK Broadband has filed against us, a Netflix rep told TechCrunch. In the meantime, we continue to seek open dialogue and explore the ways of working with SK Broadband in order to ensure a seamless streaming experience for our shared customers. I imagine it will settle. Very, very interesting to see what's going on in the world of lawsuits and the internet. Are you guys ready to talk about Britney? I am too. Hello, passenger shaming every time you say SK. This is a good SK. SK, go just be like, it's me. I'm SK Broadband. I would like $23 million from Netflix, please. Because, streaming. All right, let's get to this. Let's get to is it the main event today? Let's get to some more levity. We're just going to make light of these attorneys fighting in court because it's time. It's time to talk about attorneys fighting in court because why not? Right? Let's talk about Rosengart versus Viv. In the court of the Honorable Judge Penny. Britney Spears' hearing on the 29th has a transcript. It was shared on Twitter by Noted Your Honor. I reshared that if you want your own copy and you want to read it for yourself. I have gone through this and we are not doing a full dramatic reenactment. We are not reading the entire thing. I am going to go through, we're going to do a lot of it. We've got time. I'm going to go through a lot of the highlights and just the ins and outs. I'm going to go through where I see the judge signaling her thoughts. I'm going to go through who was appearing. I'm going to go through my thoughts on it. And I can't wait to see what you guys think about all of the different ins and outs of these lawyers fighting in court. Now, we've gone through all of the motions that they talk about in other content. If you have not liked the channel, subscribe to the channel, just do those things. But there's a Britney Spears playlist here. So go ahead and look at it if you want to know about the underlying documents that they're talking about. I'm not going to deep dive into those. But I will mention the things that we've talked about just to trigger memory. So my voice is sounding spectacular. So we're just going to drink water and we're going to talk to it. We need a Mortal Kombat game with Rosendaddy and Viv. Fight. It's just, it is going to be an interest. It's going to be, I'm just going to pull the mic closer so I'm not yelling at you all, so we can just talk in normal voice, and we're going to go through it. So thank you all. Let's talk about these lawyers having their moment in court. So reporter's transcript of proceedings, September 29th, 2021. Via LA Court Connect and in-person appearance, court-appointed counsel for Britney Jean Spears, Matthew Rosengart, Lisa McCurdy, Scott Bertstick. These are the lawyers at Rosengart's firm. I mean, there are other named partners at the firm, but some are in person, some are via court call. I think because I saw reference to McCurdy and Rosengart being in court. We know that Rosengart was present in court. I think that Scott must have been the one that was on court call. Via LA Court Connect for James Spears, Vivian Thoren, Jonathan H. Park, and then also via Court Connect for James Spears, Geraldine Weil, and Gerald Cohen. In person for John Zabel, proposed temporary conservator of the estate, was Justin Gold. Again, I think it was an interesting choice on a motion that seems so important to Dad Spears and to Vivian Thoren that she did not choose to be in court in person. I think it was a very interesting choice because it gives Rosengart the power play. Like, him being in court allows his presence to take control of the courtroom and to be the one who's directing it. And you see him in this transcript cutting off Vivian a few times. It's much harder to cut somebody off in person. I would imagine it's much easier in court if they're on Court Connect. I've never been in court when someone's on Court Connect, but I have been in court on court call, and oh my God, it's so tedious. That's just the truth. It's so tedious. Especially when you're like, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Your Honor? Can you? I can't hear counsel, Your Honor. What was said? Shit, we just have to order a transcript. I didn't hear anything. It's tedious. Via LA Court Connect for Jody Montgomery is Lorianne Wright and Marie Mondina. They speak up a little bit towards the end of this transcript. Via LA Court Connect for Lynn Spears is Gladstone and Jones and Lynn Swanson. Also for Lynn Spears is Yasha Bronstein. I keep trying to get that right. I keep probably not. Very interesting that there is an LA Court Connect for an unidentified party of interest, Kevin D. Cawley. I have not looked into this a lot. I'm sure others have. I'm interested to see who that is. Via LA Court Connect for former court-appointed counsel for Britney Jean Spears, Sam Ingham, and then Loeb and Loeb with David Nelson and Ronald Pearson. Let's get into the court. Says good morning and hello. The court swears everybody in. The court then speaks directly to the people in court, and we know there weren't very many, including like Britney Law Army on Twitter and others, but there weren't a ton of people that were allowed into court. There weren't a ton of seats. So the court says, all right, before we get started, and the court is always in blue. Throughout this whole thing, the court's in blue. I just want to remind everyone in the gallery, no phones, no laptops, or other electronic devices. No Apple Watches or other smartwatches are to be utilized in the courtroom. No, I guess, can you tweet? Can you tweet from an Apple Watch? I don't know. I guess you can text, and texting is, could you imagine like going letter by letter on your Apple Watch trying to text this out? So just, man, oh man. No picture taking or recording of the proceedings. If you want to make notes, that's fine, but you must use pen and paper to do that. Please do not disrupt the hearing by gesturing, laughing, waving arms or hands, or otherwise creating a distraction. Do none of the things. This adversely impacts my court reporter and my clerks, and please do not approach the courtroom staff. With that said, I'm going to get the appearances of counsel at the counsel table, starting with you, Mr. Bronstein. That is Yasha. YB. We're going with YB. Good afternoon, Your Honor, Yasha. So these are all the different attorneys making their appearances. Rosengart, McCurdy. Uh, we don't need all the appearances, but all the appearances are made for the record. Discussion off the record between the court and clerk. They always note what happens so that you know what's going on if there's an issue. Um, so it's interesting to me that there was a discussion off the record and then they introduced Kevin Colley. I'm very interested to know because Kevin Colley did not make an appearance for the record of who they were representing. And generally, you'll say, I mean, for example, good afternoon, Your Honor, Vivian Thuren of Holland and Knight on behalf of James Spears, conservator of the estate. When I would go to court, it would be, good morning, Your Honor, Emily D. Baker on behalf of the district attorney's office for the people. Like that is what I said to every judge every time I made a court appearance. So it's very interesting to me that there is this one attorney that there was a discussion. They're aware of who he represents. We are not. And it is a mystery to me. So he says, good afternoon, Your Honor, does not make a formal appearance in that from this law firm representing this individual. Mr. Spears, good afternoon, Your Honor. So Mr. Spears was present. Jody Montgomery was present. Britney's mom was also present on court call. So all the people. And then the court says, I've got everybody checked in. And what I want to do, just to let the council know, I want to start with Miss Thurene, and I want to go to you, Mr. Rosengart, okay? And then we'll see what happens after that. We'll just see. I think at this point, the court knew what she wanted to do. But I want to start with Miss Thurene first. And Miss Thurene, I know that you have two recent filings in the court file. Excuse me. One is the supplement stating that Mr. Spears will resign, and the other is a petition to terminate the conservatorship. And of course, these are two different positions. No shit. So what I want to know first, what's your position today? What are we doing? What are we doing? Are we terminating? Are we resigning? These are two opposite positions. So where do you stand? What the fuck's happening, Viv? What's going on? Sorry, my nose is stuffy. Miss Thurene, yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Vivian Thurene. My position today is on court call. Is that the court place the petition for termination of the conservatorship on today's calendar? This is the issue that should take priority above all other matters. We should be looking at this issue first, and that the termination issue should dictate everything else, Your Honor. The petition is uncontested. Mr. Spears is the one who filed the petition. So obviously, he agrees with his own petition. Miss Spears consents. Ms. Montgomery consents. Presumably, Lynn Spears consents. We're in the process of getting a waiver of notice from the bond company. And if it so pleases the court can decide to grant the petition today. And notwithstanding that, notice has been provided to all of the relatives to the second degree. So she goes just in arguing that we should absolutely not permit another conservator. James should not be suspended. It should just be terminated. Given that Ms. Spears has indicated expressly that she consents to the termination. And indeed, that is the premise upon which we are here. And that's what's driven Miss Spears to file this. I think, did she mean Miss Spears? Mr. Spears? It says Miss Spears to file this. She might have misspoke. There is no need to discuss any of the permanent petitions to appoint, the petition to appoint permanent conservators over Miss Spears' person or estate. That's actually very confusing, Your Honor. Why would Rosengart file a petition to appoint permanent conservator of the person and estate when we've got this termination petition that Miss Spears consents to? So I would submit, if the court grants this petition for termination of the conservatorship in its entirety, then that should dictate the schedule and the manner. She then goes on to say that the parties should be given an opportunity to try to resolve many of the outstanding pending issues as possible so that we can come up with an orderly manner in which to end the conservatorship, return the assets to Ms. Spears, and try to resolve as many issues as possible without a protracted, contentious, and public fight. And then she goes on to engage in a protracted, contentious, and public fight. The court says, okay. She says, and we request, Your Honor, that in connection with this petition for termination of the conservatorship, we'd ask the court to order the parties to a mandatory settlement conference, or in the alternative, to a private mediation, whichever the parties agree to, in furtherance of this termination and in furtherance of the transition to terminating the conservatorship, so that the parties can formally try to resolve these outstanding issues, including over $1 million in legal fees to be paid to you and your firm, and to minimize the expense overall, because it's undisputed that this would be in the best interest of the conservative. It would conserve judicial resources, and the parties and the court have certainly seen far more complex matters be resolved this way. That's my position, Your Honor. Settlement. She is again arguing for settlement or private mediation. Why? Because she doesn't want to turn over the files. That's why. The court says, thank you, Ms. Thurine. So, Mr. Rosengart, having heard Ms. Thurine's position and the court having reviewed Ms. Spears' petition to remove as well as her petition for appointment of a temporary conservator, and the court having also reviewed Mr. Spears' filings, the court can proceed in a couple of ways. There's a variety of code sections that I can utilize, but I want to find out what your position is on behalf of your client. So again, I think the court is saying that there are a number of different ways I can either terminate this or appoint a temporary conservator. What are you saying? Okay. Rosengart, and he's in green through this whole thing. Viv's in yellow through this whole thing. Rosengart says, thank you, Your Honor. As an initial matter, we certainly agree that the conservatorship can and should be wound up and terminated promptly, ideally this fall. And that's in our third supplement and our second supplement, which are covered on this channel and in the Britney playlist. The reason we are here today, in our view, with all due respect to Ms. Thurine, is because on July 26th, as we said we would, we filed a petition to suspend Mr. Spears. Now, just to put things in perspective, because something very odd is going on here on behalf of Mr. Spears initially said in his response, well, I will go, but I want to negotiate. Then he continued to take that position, effectively seeking delay, seeking a release, and seeking money. Well, accurate. And then, having been forced for the first time to confront discovery, because remember, Rosengart served discovery, including interrogatories, on James Spears, saying, we'd like to know what the fuck you've been up to. I mean, that's my summation of it. Then he goes on to say, which my firm served for the first time in 13 years. He was confronted with discovery and important questions to my client, Ms. Spears, in terms of abuse, financial mismanagement, and other misconduct. Something remarkable happened that shocked a lot of us, and I think shocked the country. He did a 180 on September 7th and said, never mind, I don't want to be suspended because that would be a very bad thing for me. Let's terminate the entire conservatorship. I appreciate it. It's just, that's exactly how I see it too. It's like, oh, just kidding. I don't want to do all this. Can we just, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do it. Nope. I don't want to do it. Can we just forget I said anything? Just whoop, let me out. Let me out. Let's terminate the whole thing. Can we just please, can we go to a settlement conference and terminate the whole thing? Because then the entire file wouldn't be turned over. But we know that's not what happened. But let's go on to see how it gets argued. I think Rosengart's exactly right. He said, never mind. Rosengart saying that James said. He said, never mind. I don't want to be suspended because that would be a very bad thing for me. Let's terminate it instead. He wants to terminate to avoid suspension for a couple of reasons. And this, I think the court knows, but it's important to say out loud and underscore and put on the record. I just agree. I agree with Rosengart's positioning on this. He wants to avoid being deposed under oath. He wants to avoid responding to extensive discovery. He wants to avoid, Your Honor, under the Mueller case and the Stein case cited in our papers, something that's crucial here. He wants to avoid his obligation as a fiduciary once he's suspended to turn over his files to not a permanent conservator of the estate, but a temporary short-term conservator of the estate. And under those two cases, Stein and Mueller, those files must include attorney-client communications. This is what he and his counsel are very concerned about. Yep. And then he does something that you will see me do all the time. because Rosengart is such a prosecutor. When I used to try cases, it's just so funny. Defense attorneys used to come in all the time to my courtroom and be like, when I was a prosecutor. And it's so funny because there's times I find myself saying it now and I'm like, oh my God, stop it. Stop it, Emily. Shut the fuck up. But it's just so funny. It's just so funny. There were a few that would always be like, I used to be a DA. When I was a DA in the office, it was always so funny to me. So he then goes on to say, when I used to try cases and as an assistant U.S. attorney, I used to tell jurors, don't check your common sense at the door. Use your common sense. And if we all use our common sense, as with the greatest respect to the court, I know the court will. That explains what's going on here. So absolutely, there should and must be termination. I love that he had a when I was prosecuting cases. Remember, Your Honor, I'm an AUSA. Then he goes on to say, but there's a very reasonable, orderly plan that we respectfully submit that the court should follow. And it's very interesting because Mr. Spears' counsel first response, what did he say? I quote, he said, I will resign, but there needs to be a quote, orderly transition. An orderly transition. Look, pause. Emily, interjection. I love an argument when a lawyer uses what the other side has said against them. It is effective, it is fantastic, and it can and should be used all of the time. If you can use what the court has said or what the other side has said to better make your point, words matter. Use the other side's words against them. Now, the only time this does not work well, depending on your goals, is when you do it to your spouse and your children. People in real life, not in court, don't love it when you use their words against them. I have a nasty habit of doing it. It's like, but you said blah, 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 blah. And it's effective. It just is. It doesn't always throw people, but it's effective. So using Dad Spears' words against him. An orderly transition, Rosengart goes on. Those were his words in his first response. We agree. There should be an orderly transition, and we proposed a very logical, reasonable, and organic plan, Judge Penny, and that is his suspension today, followed by a return to court we would submit in 30 to 45 days. In the interim, along with Ms. Montgomery and her counsel, Lorianne Wright, and we work very, very well together. Your Honor, once you get rid of Viv, we all won't be fighting. Psst, Your Honor. We all work well together. We'll just go handle it, and then we'll come back and let you know. We can do the assignment. We understand the assignment. We've created the assignment, and we understand. So we'll just go do it, and then we'll bring it back for you to approve. There won't be any more problems. Nobody will be fighting. You won't have 17 different supplementals. It won't be all brown and salty version 2.0 up in here. Your Honor, we're just going to make it so easy. We're going to make it easy for you. We work so very, very well together. Which is such a dig to Viv. It's like, we work well together, but we don't play well with them. So we will present the court with something that I think the court will want, which is a termination plan consistent with what Ms. Thurene said should happen in the first place, an orderly transition. He then goes on to say Mr. Spears intends to work with the court and his daughter's new attorney to prepare for an orderly transition to new conservator, again, using his words against him. That wasn't filed months ago. That was filed, Your Honor, as recently as a couple weeks ago on August 12th. And this hearing was September 29th. What happened to the orderly transition? My client wants, my client needs, my client deserves an orderly transition. So in short, Your Honor, I think Ms. Thurene actually said that we were creating confusion. No, to the contrary. There's a very logical process here, suspension, which I'm prepared to address today. My client insists that I address it today, followed by the appointment of a short-term temporary successor, followed by a termination plan. We'd like to come back in 30 or 45 days. And at that point, consistent with the court's discretion, given that everybody agrees, and the orderly transition that Mr. Spears' counsel insists upon, as recently as August 12th, the conservatorship should be terminated in its entirety. With the court's permission, I'd like to address very much, and I'll try to be a little more succinct. When prosecutors are prosecutors. When prosecutors are prosecutors. And I'll try to be a little more succinct than I was now because I'm surprised by some of the things I've heard. Why suspension today, Your Honor? Today is so important. And the last thing I will say before I sit down is that something else happened that is very, very dramatic, Your Honor. In the past several days, we learned, and I'm sure the court is aware, and it's now in the record, that Mr. Spears and his representatives did something unfathomable. Unfathomable. They eavesdropped on some of the most intimate conversations of my client with her children, with her boyfriend, and even worse than that, her counsel, Sam Ingham, according to the New York Times. There is a specific incredible evidence that they monitored communications with her prior court appointed counsel. Second, and relatedly, according to the New York Times, Mr. Spears instructed his security team, which was paid by him from my client's funds, from my client's estate perversely, and apparently pursuant to the instructions of a business management company as well. My client's former business management company, Lou Taylor, they plotted and schemed to place a listening device in my client's bedroom. It's shocking, Your Honor. And the reason I bring it up now, and I'd like to address it a little bit more, it explains the otherwise inexplicable, although we welcome it, but not right now. Reading the way people say things in court is hard. And the reason I bring it up now, and I'd like to address it a little bit more, is it explains the otherwise inexplicable, although we welcome it, but not right now, the 180-degree reversal from the orderly transition, quote unquote, that they wanted on August 12th to let's terminate. So he's just saying, look, Your Honor, the reason they want to terminate it now is because now we know the shit and we want to get to the bottom of the shit. And finally, famous last words. When I say finally, I'll probably go on for 10 minutes. Why am I Rosengart sometimes? Why is Rosengart me? Oh, prosecutors. And finally, famous last words. When I say finally, I'll probably go on for 10 minutes. Accurate. When I start saying goodbye 17 times. Look, it's not just me. But I'll be briefer than that, Your Honor. No, you won't. What they really want is delay. They want delay. They want a mediation. They want settlement discussions. My client has a right to be heard, as Your Honor said on July 14th, when the court graciously and courteously welcomed me into this court. And I'm grateful for that. That it's not about anyone else. It's, quote, about her, unquote. Well, I'm here to speak for my client, and she doesn't want a settlement with her father. She doesn't want a mediation with her father, and she doesn't want the delay that his counsel is asking for. Before my time, Mr. Spears went down that road before at a mediation. He wants to avoid suspension. He wants money. He wants delay. What my client wants, and we speak all the time, Your Honor, including today, is the following. Suspension today for the many reasons that suspension is mandated. It's simple, it's logical, it's fair, and it's just. And it's what my client, Britney Spears, who has been abused by this man not only for the past decade, but since her childhood, wants and deserves. Thank you, Your Honor. And then the court says, thank you, Mr. Rosengart. And Ms. Thereen said, Ms. Thereen, do you have anything to say in response? Oh, I absolutely fucking do, Your Honor. We're going to go on for pages and pages and pages and pages. Should have left it at that, but nope. Absolutely, Your Honor. I apologize. There was about a minute where I missed Mr. Rosengart's content in the last minute or so. That's why you shouldn't be on court call. What you missed is him saying that Mr. Spears is abusive. That's what you missed. First, Your Honor, I'll just go backwards for convenience. Backwards. The party seeking delay is Mr. Rosengart. This logical, orderly plan that he's proposing makes no sense. Well, it does make sense. He wants the files. There's no reason for a suspension when we have a termination right now. We can implement the plan to transition. We have the 30 to 45 days. We don't need the suspension. It's superfluous. Granting the petition for termination renders that issue moot. Moot. It's moo. But for some reason, Rosengart is intent on bringing this issue to court. And my note was, oh, for fuck's sake, we know the reason. He wants the files. Then they go on to say that the stuff from the New York Times is not evidence, it's just rhetoric. And then they go on to say the documents that he late filed to court, first of all, it's not even verified. So it's not even clear that his client is aware that he even filed the documents. And we know that he knows that pleadings need to be verified because half of his pleadings in connection with the suspension are verified and the other half are not. In addition, Your Honor, this so-called evidence, these facts, the fact that he's relying on, well, he just admitted in open court right now that he's quoting from statements from a TV show put on by the New York Times. That's not evidence. He knows better than that, Your Honor. These allegations, these statements, it's pure rhetoric. That's not admissible evidence. We've looked into this. You don't need to look into it, Viv. And we dispute these allegations. Yeah, go off, Viv. We put that to rest, right? And then Viv's in the middle of her role. At this point in time, the video and audio had technical difficulties. Discussion off the record between the court and court. Yep. Sorry, Viv. This is why you don't argue important shit over a court call if you don't have to. Pay the like $50 to park at the cathedral and go to court. Just sit in traffic. Then the court tries to get Miss Thoreen back on court call for 2 pages. And then she tries to restate where she was because she lost her role because she got cut off by technology. She goes in here and says, she restates herself and then says, there's nothing in that says Mr. Sears is seeking to avoid a deposition, that he's seeking to avoid his discovery obligation. There's nothing. In fact, the statute plainly says that termination involves a final account and report before the bond can be exonerated. Right. Which is why, look, the 12th accounting has taken a year, more than a year at this point. If he doesn't get suspended, which we know he does, but if he doesn't get suspended, then he stays quasi in charge while the accountings are going on and no one's looking into the books. That's why it matters so much, because the last accounting, the final accounting, is going to take time. And then she says, the bond can be exonerated. It's right there in the statute. Like, it's right there. The idea that suspension is part of this logical and coherent plan makes no sense. The idea that a stranger to the court, a stranger to Miss Spears, who is not a licensed professional fiduciary, who just months ago, Miss Spears said she wanted to thank that we have another professional licensed fiduciary subsequently withdraw his name. And now we have Mr. Zabel, who, again, clearly, what are his qualifications or experience in even acting as a conservator? But again, if the court grants the termination, this issue is moot. It says moot, but moot. Not to mention the fact that Mr. Zabel, as titled in our papers, himself was duped out of $1 million of his own money, and as a CPA had the experience and wherewithal to review a tax return that he had reviewed, would have seen, should have seen, that instead of stating that the value of this fraudulent investment was $1 million, should have said $6.5 million. There are red flags all over the place with the nominee to serve in Mr. Spears' place, Your Honor. There is absolutely no evidence, not a shred of evidence to support suspension, Your Honor. Suspension is an extreme remedy. We're talking about a termination. The end is in sight. I can't. Mr. Spears, Mr. Spears has faithfully and loyally served as a court-appointed fiduciary for the past 13 years. His record is impeccable. And I'm not just talking about the accounting that the court has approved every year. I'm talking about the regular, ongoing, detailed, and lengthy probate investigators report that the court is well aware of. There has never been a recommendation so much as to reevaluate his position. I challenge. Because what we saw from the New York Times is that even then, the New York Times said in the investigators report that they got a hold of, because those are sealed and we don't have them, that the arrangement was untenable. So I challenge. We're going to continue with Viv. Look, and y'all, I know we're totally making fun. I don't like Viv's position in this, but she's doing her job for her client. I just don't like the position of her client. And I don't like the position that she's taking in all of this, but she's fighting it out. And she's trying to fight it out, and she's hired to fight it out. And that's what she's doing. So, I hope we get to say, Britney's daddy loves her at least once in this transcript because it's her favorite thing to say. Uh, Miss Spears, until Mr. Rosengart entered into the case, has been continuously represented by a court-appointed counsel who is actively involved in the conservatorship proceeding. Mr. Spears has been guided by a team of professionals, medical professionals, financial advisors, legal advisors. The idea that Mr. Rosengart tried to infuse in his paper that somehow Mr. Spears came up with a team to imprison his daughter and to unwind the entirety of the conservatorship, Your Honor, that is not only not based on anything in the record, it's belied by the court investigator reports and numerous court orders in this case, the reports of the 730 experts appointed by the court, at which case I want to know what the fuck. 730 experts appointed by the court? What? 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 730 experts appointed by this court over 13 years. Okay. We're going to resume. We're going to resume. Because I'm just dead. The idea and the question that I think we need to be asking ourselves is, Miss Spears has been vocalizing recently that she wants out of the conservatorship. Why didn't Mr. Rosengart file this? Why didn't he file this for his client? And he said he filed a petition that has a successor conservator, permanent conservator of the estate. He tried to backtrack and said, oh, it's just temporary. The end is in sight. Well, if the end is in sight, let's make that the goal. Let's terminate. Let's come back after all the council have gotten together and put their heads together about a plan, and a plan that addresses all of the issues, not just the ones that he and Miss Wright decide collectively they're going to address. Your Honor, they're talking without me. Mr. Spears is intimately involved in Miss Spears, his daughter's finances. The idea that there would be a transition temporary for even 30 days makes zero sense, Your Honor. This is a complex conservatorship estate. There are 11 active entities that people who are required to transition would take far longer than just the 30 days we're even talking about. And Your Honor, I'll conclude with this. Mr. Rosengart tries to portray Mr. Spears as having done a 180 because he's somehow trying to dodge suspension. That's not it at all. As they just said, no one was filing a termination for the conservatorship. So Mr. Spears is the one who did it. And as for the basis that the alleged statements that Mr. Spears made conditioning his resignation, I don't know where they're coming from. They're coming from your filings. They're coming from your filings because that's what the fuck you said. When the time is right. I don't know where they're coming from. I have no idea. Everyone has an idea. We all know. We read your filings. So, Your Honor, I vehemently object to my client being suspended. I think it's unwarranted, unsustainable, unnecessary, and it's mooted by the fact that everyone, including Ms. Spears, consents to the termination. The court, yeah, thanks, Viv. That's not what it says. Okay, thank you, Ms. Thurin. Mr. Rosengart, Your Honor, thank you. There were two words that I don't think we heard in Ms. Thurin's response. Best interest. What's in the best interest of Britney Spears? Britney Spears deserves to wake up tomorrow, Your Honor, without her father as her conservator. Can anyone really dispute that? Miss Spears deserves to have her father out of her life as a conservator today. Today, Your Honor. Today, Junior. Sorry. I just can't. He goes on to say Miss Thurin's plan, and it is a 180, would keep him in her life as conservator indefinitely. And that's a disaster for my client. That's a disaster for my client. It is against her best interest. It's against her mental statement of mind. It is against her well-being. For Miss Thurin to actually say, and I wrote it down, she said, quote, there is not a shred of evidence to support suspension. In her papers, she wrote, there is no adequate reason for suspension. Let's go back to Britney Spears and the best interest of Britney Spears. He goes on to say, we don't have to show that he's engaged in criminal misconduct, and whether he did or did not, others will be left. And whether or not, We're going to start over. We don't have to show that he engaged in criminal misconduct, and whether he did or not, or others did, will be left up to law enforcement, not us. And then they go through the code section, and the code section we've gone through in every single one of those filings. So at the end of the day, Your Honor, although what Ms. Thureen, and I don't want to be personal, what Mr. Spears' counsel is asking for, in effect, is the status quo and delay. She knows the court isn't going to snap the court's fingers and bring down the entire conservatorship today. She wants a mediation. She wants a settlement. But what that necessarily entails is the continuing toxic, untenable presence of Mr. Spears as a conservator in the life of Britney Spears. And Your Honor, she testified so poignantly and so compellingly and so articulately on June 23rd and July 14th about the abuse that he inflicted upon her, about the cruelty. Miss Thureen can attack me. I can take it. But she's now attacking my client, her client's daughter. She used the word cruelty. Britney Spears testified under oath on June 23rd and July 14th about Mr. Spears's cruelty, about the toxic nature of his presence in her life. And Miss Thureen is saying, no problem. It'll all be worked out. It'll all come out in the wash. It'll all be terminated. That doesn't work, Your Honor, because what that necessarily means, again, is that according to my client, and these are not my words, these are my client words, that cruel, toxic, abusive man who she also reported was an alcoholic, who she was afraid of, remains in her life. Why? What possible rationale can Ms. Thureen give for asking the court to reject my client's testimony and what my client, because it's about Britney, bitch, is not about Mr. Rosengart. It's about what Britney, not me, wants. She wants him out of her life today rather than a lingering toxic presence. And that's in her testimony, which I'll resist reading to the court because the court obviously internalized it and is well aware of it on June 23rd and July 14th. So Ms. Thureen may say, well, it was impeachable. Not according to Britney Spears. According to Britney Spears, his service has been impeccable. His service has been abusive, it's been toxic, and it's been cruel. And then he circles back and says about Viv, she's willing to take cheap shots at the temporary conservator, a highly regarded CPA, suggesting that Mr. Spears was a good conservator. She put this in issue. Now we have to address that. Vivian made a critical error. She made an absolute critical error. Viv started questioning the subsequent conservator and taking pot shots at and some investment deal and starting to try to throw him under the bus. What she did was kick open the fucking door for him to address Dad Spears and Dad Spears' record on the record. She opened that door. And so that's why he's saying to the court, she opened the door. I have to respond. Do not give the man an inch, Viv, because what he's going to do is run the fuck over your client. So let's watch that happen in slow motion. Mr. Spears has zero experience in business. Mr. Spears has zero experience in finance. In fact, he filed for bankruptcy. Mr. Spears presently today has a domestic violence restraining order against him, not in connection with some third party or a stranger, but in connection with Miss Spears' ex-husband and her 2 children. Think for a second, Your Honor, what that does to the well-being and health emotionally and psychologically of Britney Spears. The conservator of the person, her father, has a domestic violence restraining order against him. He has no financial or business expertise or experience. He is the one who is running this alone. So I'm not going to get into the CPA who we've nominated. Miss Spears has signed off on. It doesn't merit much discussion other than Mr. Zabel is certainly highly qualified and far more qualified as anyone would be than Mr. Spears. What else do we know about Mr. Spears that is very traumatic to my client under the aegis of what is in her best interest today? He has reaped millions of dollars from her estate, not thousands or hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. For what? He's not a business manager. He's not a talent manager. Something else is incredibly traumatic to my client, Your Honor, which she raises constantly and rightly so is. He is taking from her estate more money per month than he has allowed her to have each month. That is something. And the court is aware of this because it's in the record. That is very traumatic to my client. He has been abusive. He has been cruel. He has been toxic. And that's not rhetoric. These are the words of my client. These are not my words. The other evidence, And this is evidence that the court is aware of and Miss Thoreen is aware of, which is why it's so disappointing. It's not even angering. It's disappointing to hear an officer of the court say there's no adequate basis for suspension. Here comes the fucking fire because Rosendaddy's disappointed. You know why Rosendaddy? He's not mad. Oh, I'm not mad. I'm disappointed that a professional, that an officer of this court, because a lawyer can't lie to the court, that an officer of this court would say there is no basis for his suspension. He goes on to say, there is a mountain of evidence mandating his suspension. Jody Montgomery has been trying to work with Mr. Spears for years. Jody Montgomery submitted a sworn declaration. She testified under oath, and this is in our petition. And it goes into Jody Montgomery's testimony that the medical professionals think it's in the best interest that Dad Spears is yeeted. He then says the court is also aware, and this is new information. The court is also aware of an October 2020 letter in the record from Miss Spears's psychiatrist in which he detailed at length how toxic Mr. Spears's presence was to Miss Spears's conservator, how necessary his suspension was to her mental health and well-being. In October 2020, when the motion was happening brought by Ingham, before the court denied the motion by Ingham. There's a letter from Britney's psychiatrist saying that he was toxic. And Viv knows that because she's had that letter for over a year. They then go on to talk about Miss Montgomery's lawyer's testimony that the medical team agrees Dad Spears needs to go. And then he says, so cutting to the chase for a moment, although Mr. Spears' lawyer dresses it up in reasonableness, at the end of the day, she's asking this court, she's asking your honor to do something that, with the greatest amount of respect to the court, doesn't make any sense and is absolutely against my client's wishes and against my client's best interest. And that is to let him linger for days, weeks, and potentially months as the conservator. It doesn't make any sense, Your Honor. And then he gets into the allegations a little with the New York Times and said, I haven't heard a denial. Let me back up one sentence. And I think Your Honor has the power to ask him, if the court wants, did he place a listening device in my client's bedroom? I haven't heard a denial of that, whether it happened or not, and that will be up to law enforcement. Whoop, there it is. Miss Spears knows about the allegation, and imagine the traumatic effect that has had on her. So she knows. She knows about the New York Times reports. She sleeps in the same bedroom that her father allegedly bugged. I mean, until she buys Jeffree Star's house and moves. But you know, this man does not belong in her life, Your Honor, for another day. The path forward is very, very simple. He must be suspended today, not because a lawyer is arguing for it, but because Britney Spears is pleading for it. She is pleading for it. Sometimes judges are asked to make very hard decisions. This is not such a decision, Your Honor. This is not such a case. This is a very easy decision. I think everyone in this courtroom knows it. I think Miss Thoreen knows it. Mr. Spears knows it. He should be suspended today. In terms of some of these side issues, the complexity of the estate, Mr. Spears, as the conservator of the estate, has effectively brought it to a halt. There's no business going on. The estate is being damaged every hour, every day by his presence, because among other things, as to Miss Spears has testified, she will not work as long as he's the conservator. He's brought it to a grinding halt. With respect to Miss Thoreen, it's not rocket science. A business manager will work with Mr. Zabel, the CPA who's represented by a well-respected member of this bar, Justin Gold, during a transition. What should happen here, Your Honor, is quite simple. He should be suspended today. The temporary conservator should be appointed. We should come back in 30 to 45 days. And on that day, we will present to the court a plan. We expect the court to sign off on that plan, the same type of orderly transition Ms. Thoreen wanted on August 12th. And the conservatorship should be terminated on that day. And if my client will be so extraordinary, hold on, I jumped. What will happen if the court doesn't proceed down that very logical, fair, thoughtful course is he remains in her life for days, weeks, and potentially months. And my client will be so extraordinarily distraught if that happens. And I'll say it to Miss Thoreen, my client will be extraordinarily distraught if Mr. Spears remains conservator for one day. One more day. One day, I was very, very, very. I'm not trying to make light. I just can't help it. Um, Having heard that, why would she ask that he remain for one more day? If he cares about his daughter, if he loves his daughter, if he cares about the law, which says the court should do, what's in my client's best interest? He will resign today. Your Honor, this has been going on for too long. In November of 2020, Mr. Ingham made an argument for suspension 1 month after the letter from her psychiatrist, apparently calling Dad Spears toxic. And Mr. Ingham pointed out that under Section 2654, I believe the court had the power to order suspension sua sponte. That means on the court's own motion. And I wasn't here, Your Honor. That was before my time. But from reading the transcript, it appeared the court was thinking about it. But there were logistical issues. There might have been procedural issues in terms of how it was teed up at the time. Ingham. There are no logistical issues or procedural issues now. We did it thoroughly, we did it quickly, and we did it properly. The July 26th petition, Your Honor, lays out why suspension is necessary. It's a certified document. The second supplement, which further magnifies why suspension is necessary, is a verified document. So, Your Honor, Ms. Thureen's a good lawyer. She's good at creating confusion. But for her to argue there's not a shred of evidence mandating his suspension today, for her to argue, quote, there's no adequate basis for his suspension today, I'm not going to make it about Ms. Thureen, but it certainly goes to the credibility of Mr. Spears. So finally, again, I'll say for everyone on the screen to hear, Britney Spears, Mr. Spears' daughter, wants him suspended or resign today. She will be incredibly distraught if she learns that he remains as conservator for another day, which at the end of the day is what they're asking for. Please hear the plea of my client, Your Honor. I'm here on her behalf. I'm her voice today. She has asked for Mr. Zabel, the CPA, to work with Michael Kane, the business manager, and other people for the next 30 to 45 days after Mr. Spears is suspended today. And then we will have a termination. Yay, Rosengart. Keep bringing it back to the point. He made it very easy. We want this, we want this, we want this. The court. Mr. Rosengart, I have a question. Yes, because there's another, and I want to hear one more time from Ms. Thureen. Why, Your Honor? Why? Why the fuck? Why? And then I'm going to let you know what my thoughts are. Under Probate Code Section 2654, I note that wasn't raised in your papers, but that is a statute that is specifically focused on suspension. You can utilize that section. So I wasn't sure why you were focusing on 2650J rather than the other section. This is a very important statement from the court, and this is why. This is the court saying, why are you using this section to suspend and not this section? Here's why. The court wants to make sure that she makes the proper ruling, and the court wants to understand Rosengart's thought process, which means the court is leaning towards suspension at this point, and Viv knows it, because the court's not asking, oh, Rosengart, why did you use this section, not that section? I can suspend him either way. If she's not thinking about suspending him, if she's not going to suspend him, the court's not asking that question. So Rosengart goes on to answer, thank you for the question. We focused on 2650J, what is in the best interest of the conservatee. I was referencing 2654 in passing because in November 2020, I believe that's what Mr. Ingham was relying on. The court said, no, that's true. But also, there's a number of statutes that come into play. And one of them for this particular case is 2654. So I'm just wondering why that, and then Rosengart seems to cut off the court. Don't do that. But it's hard when you're in the heat of the moment to not cut people off. Mr. Rosengart, I agree that this court has many tools in its arsenal to mandate suspension today, including the court's inherent power as a court that has the right and power to do so equitably. I'm not discounting 2654, Your Honor, to be clear. And the court says, thank you. And then the court says, Ms. Thureen, do you have a final comment to make? Ms. Thureen, I think you're muted. I can just imagine Vivian was like queuing up like this. And the court's like, Viv, you're muted. Can you imagine? Can you hear me, Your Honor? Yes, I can hear you now. Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, I would like to respond. Your Honor, I do agree with Mr. Rosengart. This is not rocket science. It's not rocket science. What Mr. Rosengart has been saying over and over again is that he is seeking to delay the termination. Oddly enough, And I don't know where in the probate code it says that, but somehow his understanding of the statute is that if the court grants Mr. Spears' petition to terminate the conservatorship, that somehow Mr. Spears is going to be the conservator of the estate indefinitely. That makes no sense. Well, Viv, it does make sense because Emily, interjection, if it's terminated, it can't be over until the final accountings are done, and he stays in charge until the final accountings are done. It's a disingenuous argument. If the court grants the termination, the conservatorship is over. We're talking about wrapping things up and transferring the assets back into Mrs. Spears' names, or however she wishes to have them pass title. We've got to have this wrapped up. We've got to have the final account and report. Right. That's the whole point. The final account and report are going to take for fuck ever. Mr. Spears fully intends to comply. I fully intend to comply, Your Honor. Fully. Mr. Spears fully intends to comply with his obligation, Your Honor. This court is well aware that Mr. Spears has served faithfully and complied with every single obligation that he's had and reported to the court, has worked hand in hand with the CAC before he resigned. So yet, he has somehow, Mr. Spears is going to be her conservator of the estate indefinitely if the court grants termination. It just defies logic. But let's also be clear. I think that Mr. Rosengart's argument is that somehow the suspension is going to get rid of Mr. Spears and excise him from Miss Spears' life. Let's not forget that Mr. Spears is her father. And when Mr. Rosengart talks about a stranger, an unlicensed fiduciary who the court has no idea who he is, and someone who, Your Honor, it's who Miss Spears wants. It's who Britney Spears wants. The courts. Excuse me, Rosengart, please. Miss Serene is speaking. Yeah, don't interrupt. Rosengart, thank you, Your Honor. Sorry. So sorry. The court, thank you. Go ahead, Viv. It doesn't say that. It says go ahead, Miss Thuren. When we talk about who has been there for Miss Spears, the world remembers how the conservatorship came about, Your Honor. Oh, here it goes. Here we go. The world remembers how the conservatorship came about, Your Honor. There were two very, very public 5150 holds that were going on when the conservatorship came about. That's not confidential. The world knows about that. But I want to move on. Mr. Rosengart spent considerable time talking about what's in Mrs. Spears' best interest. He made all kinds of allegations about abuse, of a toxic nature, etc. And he referenced Miss Spears' prior testimony to the court in the last couple of months. Well, that may be true that she testified to that, but she wasn't cross-examined. Nobody knows the veracity of those statements. Even Miss Wright, counsel for Miss Montgomery, stated that she disagreed with Miss Spears' testimony and that there were some misstatements in her testimony. Viv doubled down on Britney's lying to the court. No one knows the veracity of Britney's statements. In her best interest, just so I'm clear, in Britney's best interest, it doesn't matter if all of her statements are true, because in her best interest is what is in the best interest of her mental health. So even if she perceives it to be true, that's all that matters. What matters is Britney's perception, not if the fact is that she could have gone and gotten her hair done or she could have gone and gotten her nails done. What matters is that she is perceiving that this is toxic and abusive. So therefore, it's not in her best interest. This isn't hard. I'm fluffing my aura to get back into character for Viv. If you aren't watching Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, that made no sense to you, but it's a callback to Salt Lake City. Let's get back into character for Viv calling Britney a liar on the record. Let's try to get into that headspace. Jesus. Termination is the most obvious, expeditious, and logical solution. The cheaper shots that I supposedly made to this stranger to the court who's going to take over a $60 million estate and the allegations and facts that Mr. Rosengart made about Mr. Spears, well, let's look at what the actual facts are, which are that Mr. Spears was appointed as the temporary conservator in 2008 with a co-conservator of the estate, with a temporary Andrew Wallet, who the court is well aware is a highly respected trust and estates attorney and a conservator and fiduciary in many different capacities over different trusts, estates, and conservatorships over the years. and he resigned. But we continue. Together with Mr. Spears, Mr. Wallet served faithfully and loyally to Miss Spears until he resigned. Benefiting her estate, there were specific and detailed orders regarding how the investments were to be made and how the money was to be managed. So the idea that somehow, again, that Mr. Spears is unfit to serve, well, that completely flies in the face of the past 13 years where Mr. Spears was appointed. Miss Spears consented to his appointment. You all didn't give her notice. Miss Spears consented to his appointment. No, you denied her a lawyer, you didn't give her notice, and you denied her the chance to object. Let's not talk about consent, Viv. Let's just not go there. Miss Spears consented to his appointment. Fine. And if you're going to take arguendo, Viv, she's now not consenting. So done. He should resign. She's now not consenting. So even if you want to argue that she did, she's now not. The conservatorship was made permanent, and year after year after year after year, the court kept Mr. Spears as the fiduciary for Mr. Spears' daughter. It's a weird way to say that. The idea that Miss Montgomery's declaration, where she is attesting to things over which she has no personal knowledge, she's not a doctor, she's not a therapist, she's not a licensed, she's a licensed fiduciary, I'll give her that. But the idea that somehow she's an expert, she's not an expert in those medical decisions, Your Honor. The doctors told her it was toxic, and she told the court. You don't have to be a medical fucking expert to see it. I'm not a medical expert. You're not a medical expert, Viv. Just because JD allows you to call yourself doctor doesn't mean you're an expert either. Side note, lawyers that call themselves doctors that actually don't have an MD of some sort are douchebags, in my opinion. But we're going to continue. We've objected to the declaration as lacking foundation and calling for hearsay. The idea that she believes it's her strong recommendation that the conservator not be a family member. Well, again, we only look at the record. For the past 13 years, Mr. Spears has served as both conservator for Miss Spears' person until relatively recently, and continuously as the conservator of the estate, with Mr. Wallet until 2013 when he resigned. And then sole with the blessing and the cooperation and the guidance of her CAC, Sam Ingham, before he stepped down. So the idea that the court would contemplate suspension in light of what Mr. Rosengart just said, he conceded, he disavowed the New York Times, the evidence, the so-called evidence that he cited from a TV show. Okay, so where is he getting the surveillance allegation? That has no place here. I mean, but it does. She goes on to say, when she testified, Your Honor, in June and July, she said no fewer than 7 times she wanted the conservatorship to be terminated. 9 times. And when she was railing against what was going on, the complaints that she had, they weren't about Mr. Spears. They were about her medical issues. They were about Miss Montgomery. It wasn't even Dad Spears she's mad about. I won't repeat what she said either. But there were instances that were very specific where Miss Spears had a lot of concern and objections about the way in which her medical care was being run. And you know what, Your Honor? The petition to appoint Miss Montgomery is on calendar today. I don't know why Mr. Rosengart hasn't withdrawn that petition, because in that petition, Miss Montgomery would be taking over Miss Spears' ability to make medical decisions for herself. She's already doing that because she's already the conservator of the person. And we didn't want Dad to do it, but all right. There is an allegation that the court previously made an order taking away Miss Spears' ability to make medical decisions. That never happened. So why are we talking about permanent conservatorship, especially to affect a petition like that, when the obvious, thoughtful, logical path is termination? Rosengart, Your Honor. Ms. Thureen, thank you. Very briefly. I don't want court, very briefly, we have a number of other matters. Rosengart, I understand. I don't want to go in circles, and I won't, even though Thuren is. Because there wasn't a lot that we've heard that was new from Miss Thuren. What we still haven't heard is her address what is in the best interest of my client, what my client wishes. And I refer Miss Thureen to the conservatorship of Navarrete. which I know the court is aware of. It's cited in our papers, and the court is aware of it through the court's distinguished tenure on the bench and before. A conservatee cannot be forced against her wishes to have a relationship with her father. Ms. Thoreen, once again, and I don't know if this is just advocacy or if she's intentionally trying to deceive the court, suggested that these were my allegations. This is not about me. This is about my client, Britney Spears. It's Britney Spears who testified that she was abused by her father. It's Britney Spears who testified that he is toxic in her life. It's Britney Spears who testified that he was cruel. Now, Miss Thurin may not believe that. So let me suggest this. It doesn't matter if Miss Thurin or Mr. Spears believes that. That's actually irrelevant because Miss Spears, Britney Spears, believes it. She's telling the truth. But even if she were not, even if the court were to accept that Miss Thoreen just said that Mr. Spears deserves a gold medal as Father of the Year, which is sort of laughable, Your Honor, that wouldn't matter because my client, Britney Spears, believes that he's abusive, cruel, and toxic, and she's right. And that's what matters. He's having his moment. He's having his moment. Go ahead. Go ahead, Rosa. Go off. Go off. Miss Spears believes he was abusive, cruel, and toxic, and she's right, and that's what matters. Just a couple of points. I think a lot of us are scratching our heads. Why is she doing these gyrations to avoid suspension? What's the big deal? What are they afraid of? His daughter wants him gone. Step down. When everyone says you're dead, lie down. His daughter wants him gone. Step down. What he's afraid of is the revelation of his corruption, because under the Mueller case and under the Stein case, they're required to turn over their files. And if the court doesn't grant suspension, that will not occur. And I believe in those files, we will find evidence of his corruption and worse. So Ms. Thurin wants to suppress evidence of his corruption. It's not our main point, but it's relevant because it explains why she is twisting and turning to avoid the obvious, which is his suspension. The back bends. She has broken her back on this. And then finally, Your Honor, my last point. Ms. Thoreen said I was about disavowing the New York Times. This isn't about the New York Times. This is about a whistleblower named Alex Valslav, who very credibly provided specific and credible evidence, emails, about what Mr. Spears did here in terms of the bugging and eavesdropping of his daughter. But again, we don't even need that. We have it, but we could throw it out. All we need is the testimony of Britney Spears. All we need is the fact that Mr. Spears, sitting here today, has a domestic violence restraining order against him involving Britney Spears' children. I came into this case, the court graciously welcomed me, and I'll forever be grateful to the court, as a commercial litigator, not a conservatorship lawyer. But I'd ask the court, I'd ask Ms. Thoreen, I'd ask counsel on the screen, is there a precedent for a conservatorship to be in place who has a domestic violence restraining order against him? I think he meant conservator, let alone requiring him to stay away from the father of the conservatee's children? I'd bet good money that the answer is no. And that in and of itself, although there's about 15 other pieces of substantial credible evidence warranting his removal under 2650J, that mandates his removal. And then finally, just going back to Ms. Montgomery, Ms. Thoreen is wrong on the law. Ouch. The cutting level of that insult is appreciated to those within the legal profession. I'm just going to say you're wrong on the law is a big insult. It's you don't know what the fuck you talking about. And I'm going to call it out in court when I can't say you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Miss Thoreen is wrong on the law. She's wrong on the facts and she's wrong on the law. This is not a jury trial. The rules of evidence don't strictly apply. And we have a very sophisticated jurist in Your Honor. And then he dimes out Viv, and then he appeals to the flattery of the court with and we have a very sophisticated jurist in Your Honor. I mean, the man has court presence, which is clear, and shade in spades. He quotes the law, and then he goes on to talk about why Miss Montgomery's allowed to say what she says. And he goes, and finally, Miss Montgomery is an expert. And as a social worker, Miss Montgomery is an expert. So he goes into the law that allows an expert to relate what other experts say. So he goes through the rules of evidence and schools Viv on the rules of evidence and says if this court wants to disregard Miss Montgomery's sworn testimony that Mr. Spears is toxic and must go, if this court wants to disregard the medical opinion of her psychiatrist, which is on the record in the form of his October 2020 letter, which the court previously ignored when her previous attorney tried to do this. They tried to do this in November 2020 and the court ignored it, and Rosengard's not going to let the court ignore it this time. That his presence is traumatic. I suppose the court can do that, but it still wouldn't matter because it'll come back to one person and one person alone. My client, Britney Spears, who is pleading with this court, consistent with the Navarrete case, consistent with 2650J, consistent with all the other stuff, to suspend Mr. Spears. It's an easy call, Your Honor. I hope and pray that the court appreciates my passion. I feel strongly about it because my client feels strongly about it. Just logistically, after he's suspended today, and this is, hey, Your Honor, we've already got this all handled for you. Don't worry about it. This is what happens next. We're all good. So he's moving on as if the judge has already decided. And that is a very big power play because it's just saying, just logistically, after he is suspended, it assumes the result. After he is suspended today, Mr. Gold, Justin Gold, known to this court, will be working with the CPA and the business manager. Mr. Spears will still have the fiduciary obligation as a suspended conservator to work with the new team, which will include Mr. Kane, the business manager whom Mr. Spears chose for the orderly transition. So it's simple, Your Honor. In terms of the path forward, my client, Britney Spears, is begging this court to do the right and just thing, suspend Mr. Spears today, pursuant to her wishes, appoint the temporary conservator, who is a highly qualified CPA under the law. He will work with new management team. Let's come back in October or November, pursuant to a reasonable termination plan, and terminate the entire conservatorship. Done. The court knows there has to be a transition. And I say this only by way of trying to explain the gyrations that we're hearing from opposing counsel in terms of trying to put the cart before the horse. And again, what happens if the court does put the cart before the horse by not suspending Mr. Spears is Britney Spears wakes up tomorrow with him still in her life as a conservator, which is inappropriate, unwarranted, and anathema to her. For all of these reasons, Your Honor, and with the greatest of respect to the court, I ask that the court accept my client's plea, her fervent plea to suspend her father today, to appoint Mr. Zabel as the temporary conservator. We will work with Mr. Gold and Mr. Kane of Miller Kaplan, the business management team chosen by Mr. Spears and Ms. Thoreen. And let's come back in October when the court reviews the termination plan, and I and Ms. Wright will present on behalf of my client, and Ms. Montgomery, and the end of this Kafka-esque nightmare that my client has been faced with. I want to thank the court for your time and courtesy. The court, okay, Mr. Your Honor, I apologize, but I need to respond to some of Mr. Rosengard's comments, and I beg the court's indulgence. It will take two. The court, okay, I'm just going to let both of you know. I'm going to let Ms. Thoreen say something, but then I'm going to be making some rulings, okay? Mr. Rosengard, yes, Your Honor. The court, go ahead, Ms. Thoreen. Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, let me be more specific about the comments I've made. I did not use the words, what is in Ms. Spears' best interest? So let me clarify that so it doesn't appear as though I skirted that issue. Everything Mr. Spears has done for Ms. Spears has been in her best interest. It is only her best interest that he has had in mind with connection to his service as conservator. So what is in Ms. Spears' best interests? Would it be in her best interest, after begging and pleading this court no fewer than 7 times for termination of the conservatorship, for her to wake up tomorrow and she's still in a conservatorship? Or will she wake up and if this petition for termination is granted, she will both not be under her conservatorship, and 2, her father will not be a conservator by virtue of the termination. What is not in Ms. Spears' best interest, Your Honor, is to bring a stranger with the added delay, expense, and inefficiency, unfamiliarity, complete ignorance with respect to Ms. Spears' assets, and then try to work out some transition. This is not in her best interest, Your Honor. Mr. Rosengart cited to a number of cases, none of which apply here, Your Honor. Under Sanchez, which he didn't quote at all. Sanchez was never brought up. Under Sanchez and under the probate code directly, the court knows it can't consider Miss Montgomery's declaration contested, and it's hearsay evidence in connection with medical information. Yeah, but she's an expert. She's allowed to do that. She goes on to say, Mr. Spears hasn't talked to his daughter in many months. He would love to. He misses her dearly. Navarrete doesn't even apply. There's no forced visitation. This was a developmentally disabled conservatee with a contested conservatorship, and without the appointment of a conservator. That's the Navarrete case that she's trying to distinguish, but she doesn't finish the point, because then she goes, but Your Honor, what is really troubling about Mr. Rosengard's most recent statement that really drove the point home is the delay. The purpose of the delay and the purpose of not terminating today, which is the final reason, because we can kill two birds with one stone here, is that he's now implicating that he wants the files of Mr. Spears because he wants to go digging. He wants to unwind all of these orders. No, he wants to find the corruption. At the beginning, Your Honor, when I made my argument about these papers that were filed on Miss Spears' behalf, where he's trying to undermine the integrity of the judicial system, the court officers, the probate investigators, all of the fiduciaries and counsel and teams that have been involved, he's trying to dig something up. He wants the files. That's the reason for the delay. Well, at least you finally hit the nail on the head, Viv. He's not trying to undermine the integrity of the judicial system. He's trying to find the integrity in this judicial system. It's not in Miss Spears' best interest. What, to find the corruption? It's not in Britney's best interest to find the fucking corruption? Are you serious? Okay. We're fluffing. It is not in Miss Spears' best interest. Her best interest would be served by waking up tomorrow and no longer being in a conservatorship and taking this awful plan that Mr. Rosengard has articulated, eliminating the middleman itself, or however you want to characterize it, and having the attorneys work together to come up with this transition plan. This is the most logical and common senseful thing. I didn't do that line justice. Let me do that line justice. That is the most logical and common senseful thing. I'll concede there, Your Honor. Thank you. Look, Viv doesn't want those attorney-client communications coming out either. I want to know what Viv knows about all these recordings, because there's a fight. There's a big fight here, and there's a reason for the fight. Let me make this bigger. The court goes on to say, I want to thank both of you for your arguments this afternoon, and I have been reading all of the pleadings as they've been coming in, the supplements, the various declarations from the parties, and I have heard what you had to say this afternoon, and I know that both of you are, from your own client's perspective, are giving the court, your best arguments on the issue. But as I have said, I've read and considered the pleadings that have been filed by the parties, and I've heard from every one of the parties today. And I think that, based on what I've read in the file, the pleadings that have been filed considering both terminations and removal, the petition for appointment of a temporary conservator, I've looked at everything. I've read everything. But I do believe that under Probate Code Section 2654, I believe that the suspension of Mr. James Spears as conservator of the estate of Britney Spears is in the best interest of the conservatee, Britney Spears. The pleadings filed by both parties, in my view, make it clear that the current situation is not tenable, and the only change in the present arrangement that makes sense at this point. The pleadings appear to this court to reflect a toxic environment which requires suspension of James Spears as conservator of the estate of Britney Spears effective today. Whoop, there it is. This change the court finds is in the best interest of the conservatee, which is my focus. This order shall remain in full force and effect pending further hearing on the petition for removal of the conservator, and Mr. Spears is ordered to turn over all of the conservatorship assets of Britney Spears forthwith to the temporary conservator of the estate of Britney Spears, the appointment of whom I will be making today. Yep. Boom. And then something happens. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and handle that matter, and then we'll likely take a break for 15 minutes, and then we're still in session, everyone, please. I imagine the people in the courtroom were like, wow. The bailiff, have a seat. The court, we're not in recess. So I'm going to handle the petition at 5014, which is the appointment of the temporary successor of the conservator. And then the court goes on and appoints the temporary successor conservator of the estate. And then the court finishes that appointment. Then the court goes on and lists out the powers that we've gone through in the minute orders. Then the court starts asking about setting dates, and the court goes on that she's going to take a break. So I've made the order today, and then we're going to take a break, I think about 5 minutes after 3. So we'll take a break until 3:20. The attorney for the CPA says, Your Honor, very briefly, the court did make the order to turn over the books and records. Given the short transition period we're looking at, can we have a date certain by which the books and records will be turned over electronically, maybe within 5 days or a week, so that we can keep it tight? And the court says, Ms. Thorin, how soon can you get all that information to Mr. Gould's office? Viv says, Your Honor, just to clarify, are we talking about all of the books and records of the entirety of the conservatorship? No shit, Viv. That's what they just said. The court. Did you hear Ms. Thorin's question? Mr. Gould, I did, Your Honor. I'll work with Ms. Thorin on that directly. We'll figure it out in due course because it's a complicated question that I think Ms. Thorin and I should talk about. The court said, okay, you'll meet and confer on that. Ms. Thorin said, there is one thing in connection with this appointment. Does the court investigator intend to interview Ms. Spears over the next 2 days? Because that's the requirement when the conservatee does not appear. So then Viv can't stop. She can't stop. She can't stop herself. The court said, so Ms. Thorin, this is a temporary appointment. The court investigator doesn't do investigations for the temporary. They do one for the permanent, but this isn't the permanent. I'm just making a temporary appointment now. And I have to make an order about how long the letters are going to be valid for. So that is, Your Honor, yes, I apologize. I'm looking at Probate Code section 2250.6, and the title of that section is Investigation and Interview relative to proposed temporary conservatee. The court, okay, so Ms. Thorin, let me tell you what happens on a temporary. They run a background check. That's what they do. And in every conservatorship that I'm aware of, and on a conservatorship of the estate, they don't do a report. They do a background check. So Viv is trying to get the court to force an interview of Britney, knowing that during this hearing, Britney's out of the country on vacation with her boyfriend. She just doesn't stop. So if somebody's seeking to be the conservator of the person, yes, they do a court investigation of that individual. But for an estate, they only do a background check. Your Honor, this point gives me some pause. If Mr. Zabel were a licensed professional fiduciary, but he's a stranger, we don't even have his CV. We don't know what prior experience he has. And to have a multi-million-dollar estate turned over to him, even on a temporary basis, given his history, I appreciate that the court is not accepting the request for judicial notice, but there are no facts in the opinion that I think warrant some further, investigation beyond just a background check. Rosengart, Your Honor, please, this is disrespectful. The court, you're talking over here. Rosengart, I apologize. The court, go ahead, Ms. Thorin. Ms. Thorin, no, I've said that, Your Honor. Okay. Yes, Mr. Rosengart. I was simply going to say, Your Honor, and I apologize for interrupting. I think it was disrespectful to the court for Ms. Thorin to make that statement. Mr. Zabel is a nationally recognized CPA. He will be working with Mr. Kane. I'm a stranger to the court as well, and you welcomed me. And I appreciate you welcoming Mr. Zabel, who is Britney's choice. He will be working with Mr. Gould and Mr. Kane. There will be no issues. Thank you, Your Honor. The court, okay. Thank you. So we need to make a determination before we take a break about how long the letters are going to be valid for. So you're looking for, what's the time you're looking for? And then they talk about the timing of how long it should be before they come back to hear the termination, which we now know is set for November 12th. The court said, okay, how long will it be? Ms. Thorin, Your Honor, this is just letters. We're not talking about anything else. This is just how long the letters will be in effect. That's correct. Okay, and Your Honor, before we take a break, I'd like to request a statement of decision in connection with Mr. Spears' suspension and the appointment of a temporary conservator of the estate. The court, okay, well, Ms. Thorin, we've only been in session for like an hour. Ms. Thorin, I wanted to say before I forgot, Your Honor, I don't want to forget. The court, well, we'll have to talk about that, Ms. Thorin, because for the purposes of, under the code section that I utilized, it's not an appealable order under the code section. I went under... It's not an appealable order under 2654. So Vivian Thorin is asking for a statement of decision, meaning she wants the court to write out her decision so that they can appeal it. That's what she was asking for. And the court was like, no, bitch, we're not doing that. The court said, I went under 2654. It's not appealable. Ms. Thurene, I understand that I nevertheless request a statement of decision. There are other appellate remedies that we might be exploring, so I'd respectfully request a statement of decision in connection with the suspension and appointment of a temporary conservator of the estate. The court, okay, so this is a temporary appointment, Ms. Thurene, so we'll have to talk. Like, sit down, Ms. Thurene. Stop embarrassing yourself. Ms. Thurene, I understand, Your Honor. The court, when we come back from break, we'll talk about it, okay? Thank you. Thank you. So we'll be in recess. And then the court takes a break. The court comes back on calendar. The court talks about the other financial matters on calendar. Ms. Wright talks about looking at the termination, but it moving on. The court talks about extending all of the letters to the December 31st, which is what they do. They talk about dates. And then Marie Mondina, on behalf of Jody Montgomery, comes on and talks about Jody Montgomery's fees. And then the court says there's no objections to these fees. Rosengart, correct. The court, okay, so on that one, Vivian, Your Honor, Vivian Thurene, yes. Your Honor, I'd like to request that all fee petitions, including Ms. Montgomery's, be put over to the same date. The court, okay, what would be the basis for Ms. Montgomery not being awarded now? Ms. Thurene, I'd like an opportunity to confer with my client, Your Honor, not right now, but during a continuation period. The court, okay, I guess I'm a little confused because her fee petition, when you say confer with your client, I understand that part, but this fee petition was filed in March of this year. There are no objections to it by yourself or anyone else. So now, Vivian has had the fee petition of Jody Montgomery since March, but because she didn't get her way, it seems to me is stomping her feet and saying, look, we don't want her to get paid right now. Put it over. Put it over. We might object. You've had it since March. It's September. If you were going to object, but you didn't. And the court's like, I'm confused. And Vivian goes, I understand that, Your Honor, but much like all the other fee petitions, it was filed and put over due to probate notes and procedural defects, and they've been unpaid. Admittedly, we've not paid close attention to the fee petitions as some of the more pressing substantive matters. So in the sense that all the fee petitions are being continued and some of Ms. Montgomery fee requests relate to the time period where Mr. Spears' accounting and activities are involved in overlap, I'd like an opportunity to look at that again and determine whether or not we'll be doing anything in connection with the fee petition. Now they're like threatening to not pay Jody Montgomery. We want to object. Guess what? You don't get to pay her anymore. There's a new conservator of the estate. You don't get to object. And then Jody Montgomery's lawyer says, Your Honor, what we're not going to do. Your Honor, this is Ms. Wright. I just want to make sure for the record that our fee petition was properly noticed and the deadline for Mr. Spears to object to it would have passed a long time ago. Right, because it was filed in March. The court, yeah, I'm just a little bit baffled by it, Ms. Thurene. Your request, because like I said, it's been pending for quite a while. No one has objected. Unlike the other account fee petitions and accountings, Vivian's fees are being protested. But Jody Montgomery and her lawyer's fees are not being protested or objected to. No one has objected to Ms. Montgomery's fees. So I put that in a little bit different category than the other ones because there's no objection to her fees. Ms. Thurene, I understand, Your Honor. Mr. Nelson, Your Honor, this is David Nelson, if I may also speak. And then they go into Loeb and Loeb's fees. And then Viv says, Your Honor, Vivian Thurene, we just reviewed and received a supplement for 3 years worth of time in connection with Mr. Ingham. Given the number of matters on calendar today, we've not had an opportunity to review those extensively. I absolutely would ask for a continuance as to Mr. Ingham and co-counsel's fees. Your fee petitions are so fucking long, Vivian. We know how much time you're spending on this. Is it all going to media matters? Because you haven't reviewed anything. And then they put that one over. And then they're talking about the fees for Sam Ingham. And they put that over. And then the attorney for Jody Montgomery pipes back in and says, Your Honor, this is Ms. Wright. Again, I object. The deadline to object to our fee petition, Jody Montgomery's, passed a long time ago. It was actually ready to get granted in July. It had all of the confidential notes cleared. We haven't filed anything since July. It's been ready to be granted. I think Mr. Spears has had plenty of time to comb through our fee petition and come up with any objections that he has, and his deadline is gone. The court, yes. Vivian Thurene, Your Honor. The court, go ahead. As far as I'm aware, I don't know that there was any deadline to file objections to the various fee petitions. And as I mentioned, there is a new claim that has been raised during the period of time where Miss Montgomery served as the temporary conservator of the person together with Mr. Spears as conservator of the estate. He'd asked for one more continuance, Your Honor. There's been a lot of new information that has come before the court. Not since July. A lot of allegations, the new claims, and I'm asking for one more continuance and a file by date. She wants more time to object. The court, well, I'm happy to give you, here's what I'm going to do. And then the court kind of splits the baby and pays half of the fee petition and not the other half. And then it goes on with the fee petition. They pay half of the fees to Miss Montgomery and give Miss Thoreen time. Miss Montgomery's lawyer's like, the statutory time has still passed, so it doesn't fucking matter. Object all you want, the time has passed. Then it comes up that Sam Ingham hasn't gotten paid by Dad Spears, even though it was approved. And they go into an argument about that, which they say is a mix-up, but it goes back and forth about Sam Ingham's fees and about why they haven't been paid. Then Viv's objecting to Ingham's fees and stomping her feet a little bit more. Then they talk about the dates and they talk about a termination date. And they start trying to set dates. And Viv says, Your Honor, Vivian Thoreen, is the reason for the continuance the termination due to the notice issue? Because if it's otherwise uncontested and we simply stipulate now, subject to serving the notice, we could file a stipulation, in a couple of weeks and the notice issue is resolved. So she goes back to trying to ask the court to terminate the conservatorship after all of it. And Rosengart says, Your Honor, that doesn't work. She's re-arguing essentially. And the court says, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. The court's dying slowly. The court's like, yeah, I know. Rosengart, what we spent all afternoon arguing, thank you, Your Honor, because they talk over each other. Viv says, no, I'm not trying to re-argue. I'm just trying to come up with a procedural mechanism. If Mr. Rosengart and I can stipulate, I'm trying to. Your Honor, there are. Let her finish her statement, please. Go ahead, Ms. Thoreen. To the extent that the termination is not contested and we need to serve notice, is there a reason that we would have to come back for a hearing on termination other than it's in connection with the wrapping up of the transition? Mr. Rosengart said, not based on my availability, Your Honor. I'm happy to speak with Ms. Thoreen after today to see if we can work out some form of a stipulation. And then they talk about stipulating to terminate, but the court's already ruled. And then they talk about mid-November. The court looks at their calendar. Recess is taken. Rosengart looks at his calendar. The other lawyers, there's a fucking fleet of lawyers. They all look at their calendars. And then the recording goes down. And then they come back and the court said, okay, so the parties have reached out to the other counsel. Everybody's in agreement about November 12th. And then they go through November 12th. They have more Zoom issues, discussions off the records. And then Miss McCurdy, who's from Rosengart's firm, comes in and reminds the court. Rosengart's firm jumps in and says, let's talk about the Code of Civil Procedure, and says, so the section that states that the request must be made within 10 days after the court announcing a tentative, which there was not in this case, or in a matter of this duration, it must be made prior to the submission of the matter for decision. And I believe Your Honor has already announced the decision before the request came in. The court, that's correct. Ms. Thoreen, can you hear us? So what the court has now said, and what the firm from Rosengart, the other attorney, Lisa McCurdy, said, is that Vivian asked for that statement of decision, but she didn't ask at the right time. And so because she didn't ask in the right time, it's barred under the rules of procedure. So then Rosengart's firm's like, Your Honor, by the way, she can't ask for a statement of decision. Just here's the code section that says she can't do that. She can't do that. She can't do that. Ms. Thoreen, can you hear us? Yes, Your Honor. I can hear you, Your Honor, but I can't hear anything counsel said. And then they go through it again. They have counsel step up to the microphone. They talk about it again. And Ms. Thoreen said, okay, the court says, okay, to Ms. Thoreen, the issue raised, the question I have, I have made the ruling in the very brief hearing about a request for a statement of decision, and counsel for Miss Spears has an objection about that and about the timeliness. And I will let her state her argument. I'm giving you a summary of what happened because they were having issues. Ms. McCurdy again says, yes, Your Honor, the request is untimely. And Vivian says, Your Honor, Vivian Thoreen, I would modify my request. I realized looking at the statute that we did not have a trial on this matter. No shit. You asked for something you can't get. So instead, I'd like to request that the court provide an order, a detailed order or notice of ruling or something to that effect, that would be the equivalent of a statement of decision, but is technically not a statement of decision since we don't have a trial on this issue. And the court said, well, I'm sure that counsel could submit an order on what I made. And then Ms. McCurdy said, we're happy to submit an order. And that's why the minute orders took a while to come in because the attorneys were working together on what the minute order was going to say, and that's why it took so long, because Viv just kept going on and on and on. I imagine that for anyone in court, this would have been entertaining, except those that aren't lawyers that would have been like, what the fuck is happening and why the back and forth? But y'all, we are like 2 hours and 40 minutes in, so I'm going to be very brief in saying goodbye today. Because I want to talk to you all about this more, but we're going to have to do it another time because I spoke forever. I'm sorry. I always overestimate how long these things will take me. I will probably clip this down into its own video so that it's up so that this part can just be viewed without the other stuff. Thank you. I saw the super chats coming in. I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of them. A huge thank you to the mods for a extended live stream today. I cannot wait on the like lifetime series that is going to be all of this. So much information has come out in recent months about this conservatorship. It's just so crazy. I can't wait to see all of it. This was a very interesting thing. And again, Vivian Thuren, though I make fun and I mock with my voice, is arguing for her client. That's her job. I am not empathetic to her client or her client's position based on everything that I've read. I'm just not. And you guys know that. I'm honest with you about that, but she is doing her job. I think Vivian has made some arguments that are disingenuous, but I don't think she's gone completely out of bounds. If something was completely out of bounds, I would call it out. And Rosengart definitely stepped over her toes. Attorneys do that. I think it's easier to do when somebody's on Zoom is to cut them off. It's not supposed to happen in court. It is a bit rude. So that is kind of where we are with those things. I think that Rosengart did a much better job arguing. I think that the arguments from Vivian Thurene were whiny. Just the way that they read to me in my head were whiny. It was like, but Your Honor, but this and but that and but this and but that. And he's been great. They didn't really address Rosengart's arguments. They complained to the court. And that is where the voice came from because it felt the words just lent themselves to being discussed in that way because it felt complaining. It was like, but mom, he's touching me. Oh my God, they said this, but it's been 13 years and it's been great. It's great. Everything's great. Britney's daddy loves her. It was just, yeah, I was over it. So hopefully you enjoyed that recitation of what went down in court on September 29th. If we need to do it again in a different way with a full voice and maybe a full panel, don't worry, we will. And I appreciate all of you for being here. Thank you for being law nerds. For all of you who super chatted, I'm sorry I didn't get to all of them today. I put way too much on the docket today because I will not be live on Friday. I'm sorry, but I appreciate it. Call me Al Motion to re-record this transcript as a dramatic ASMR for the other channel. Sure. The shade is glorious in it. The tea is hot. We learned some new things. We learned about that October 2020 letter that really gave us some new context to when this motion was made before and denied by the court, which says a lot about how the court was persuaded by Rosengart versus being persuaded by Ingham. And that says a lot about the quality of the argument truly and the way that Rosengart continued to focus the court on this is simple. You just need to do this and this. All you need to do is this and this. In her best interest. Say it with me, everyone. In her best interest. And the court did. So it is. Rosengart made the better argument. And I think that with this transcript being public, if he had brought out that there was a psychiatrist letter on the record showing that this was toxic and the court had denied this, I would have lost my ever-loving mind when this came out. So I'm glad. I think things are proceeding well, and we will see what happens on November 12th. But until then, follow me on social media at the Emily D. Baker on Instagram and Twitter. I will be at a conference, so no Friday Night Live this week. There will be a new Emily Show episode up on Wednesday. That's tomorrow. So hit the bell, join the text crew. You know how to do all the things. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for 163,000 followers. We're still pushing. We're pushing towards 200K. Just because, it'll be fun. And we'll dye the hair a slightly different color at 200K. Thank you all. Thank you, mods. I appreciate you. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. I'll see you next time. Mwah. Connect with me everywhere. I'm at the Emily D. Baker. If you guys want to join the text, just text Emily.com. If you want to join the channel, lawnerdsunite.com. Happy to have you. Support what we do here on the YouTube.